My name is Jessica Thornton, and I am 31 years old. What I am about to tell you happened 8 months ago, but every detail is etched in my memory with a clarity I wish I could erase. My therapist says talking about it will help, that putting it into words will take away its power. I don't know if she's right, but here I am trying to articulate the worst experience of my life. The weekend that I thought would be the beginning of something beautiful, but turned out to be a meticulously planned nightmare. It all started in March. I'd been single for 2 years after a difficult breakup. Not devastating, just exhausting. Mike and I had been together for 5 years, and we just drifted apart, like two continents slowly moving away from each other until there was nothing left connecting us. After that, I threw myself into work. I'm an architect at a medium-sized firm in Seattle, and avoided dating. My friends pressured me to get back in the game, as they put it. I finally gave in and downloaded Hinge. I did so without much expectation. I spent 3 weeks swiping half-heartedly, having superficial conversations that fizzled out after 2 days. Then his profile popped up. Ethan, 33, civil engineer. His photos were good, but not in an arrogant way. In one, he was on a hike, smiling naturally with a lake behind him. In another, he was in a bookstore, holding a Murakami book. In the third, he was with a golden retriever. His bio was simple. I believe in deep conversations, spontaneous adventures, and dark coffee, seeking real connection in an era of superficiality. I liked him more on impulse than out of real expectation. We matched within minutes. His first message was, "Jessica, your profile mentions that you designed a community shelter. That's amazing. What led you to social architecture?" Not the typical, "Hey," or "You're beautiful." A real question about my work, something I was passionate about. I replied, he replied. The conversation flowed naturally. We talked for 3 days before he suggested a video call. To make sure we're both real people and not highly sophisticated bots, he joked. I agreed. The video call was perfect. Ethan was handsome in person, but in an approachable way. Slightly messy brown hair, warm green eyes, easy smile. We talked for 2 hours. He made me laugh. He shared stories about his work building bridges, literally and metaphorically as he put it. He asked about my projects, my passions, my fears. When I mentioned that my biggest fear was living a life without purpose, he nodded seriously. Me too. That's why I chose my field. I wanted to build things that would last, that would help people connect. It seemed too good to be true, but there he was, on screen, being exactly what I had been looking for without admitting it. We had our first in-person date a week later. Coffee in a quiet spot downtown. It lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything. Childhoods, families, ex-partners, ambitions. He was open without being intense, vulnerable without being needy. When I told him about my breakup with Mike, about how he had left me feeling like I had failed at something fundamental, he said, "Love shouldn't make you feel like a failure. It should make you feel more like yourself." Perfect. Exactly what I needed to hear. Second date, Italian dinner. Third, walk in Discovery Park. Fourth, movie and drinks afterward. Each date better than the last. Ethan remembered everything I said. Little details. That I preferred green tea over coffee after 4 p.m. That my younger sister was named Claire and was studying medicine in Boston. That my favorite author was Murakami, like the book in his photo. "Norwegian wood is my favorite of yours," he said during our 5th date. "Something about the melancholy and human connection resonates." It was my favorite. I didn't remember telling him that specifically, but I must have mentioned it. Conversations blended together after weeks. After a month of dating, I felt more connected to Ethan than I had to anyone in years. Rachel, my best friend, was thrilled. "You finally met someone good. Don't ruin it by being too cautious." She was right. After 2 years of loneliness, I deserved to give romance a chance. It was Ethan who suggested the weekend at the cabin, 6th date, sushi dinner. "Hey, I know it's a little soon, but I have access to a cabin in the mountains. Beautiful, secluded, next to a lake. Would you be interested in getting away for a weekend? No pressure, separate rooms if you prefer, just time to get to know each other away from the noise of the city. I should have said no. I should have insisted on more time, more public dates. But something in his tone, the way he smiled shyly, convinced me. Separate rooms sounds good for starters, I said. But yes, I'd love to. Perfect. Next weekend. I promise you the most relaxing experience of your life. That should have been my first red flag. The way he said, I promise. So confident, as if he already knew. The following Friday, Ethan picked me up at 3 p.m. at my apartment. He drove a gray Subaru Outback, clean and unremarkable. Ready for adventure? He asked with that smile that melted me. He was carrying a small backpack, supposedly just for the weekend, and a grocery bag with wine and cheese. Ready, I replied, getting in. I had told Rachel where I was going, with whom, and sent her the address of the cabin Ethan had shared with me. Basic precautions, I explained. She approved. Send me a photo when you arrive, and text me every morning and night, just to let me know you're alive. She said it jokingly, but we both knew it was sensible. The trip took 2.5 hours to the Cascade Mountains. We chatted easily, listening to an indie folk playlist that Ethan said he had made with me in mind. The songs were all by artists I liked: Bon Iver, Fleet, Foxes, Iron and Wine. You're really good at remembering my tastes, I said, impressed. I pay attention when I care about someone, he replied, briefly placing his hand on mine on the console. Sweet gesture. Perfect. We arrived as the sun was beginning to set, gilding the mountains. The cabin was exactly as he had described, rustic but cozy, 2 stories surrounded by dense pine trees. The lake sparkled 50 yards away, isolated, yes, but in a good way. Privacy, peace, romantic. It's beautiful, I said genuinely as I got out of the car. I thought you'd like it. It belongs to a family friend. He hardly ever uses it. I was lucky to get it for this weekend. He took our bags out of the trunk. Come on, I'll show you inside. The cabin was spacious. Large living room with a stone fireplace. Modern kitchen with a granite island. 2 bedrooms upstairs. The decor was what you'd expect. Wooden furniture, woven blankets, large windows overlooking the forest. Cozy, safe. I told you separate bedrooms, Ethan said, pointing to the 2 doors upstairs. You choose first. I chose the one facing the lake. I unpacked while Ethan prepared something in the kitchen. When I came downstairs, he had lit the fireplace and poured red wine into 2 large glasses. A cheese board and crackers were on the coffee table. Candles were lit. A perfectly romantic scene. Impressive, I said, sitting down next to him on the sofa. You could do this professionally. Just for you, he replied, raising his glass. Here's to first weekends. May this be the first of many. We drank. We talked. He asked questions about my family, my childhood. I told stories about growing up in Portland, about my divorced parents, about Claire and I exploring the woods behind my mother's house. He shared about his family in Spokane, parents still married, older brother in the military. Everything fit. Everything was normal. After 2 glasses, I felt relaxed. The tension of weeks of dating, of calculating every word, of protecting my heart, dissolved. Ethan was real. This was real. I had finally found something genuine. Your mom still lives in that house in Portland, right? He asked casually as he poured more wine. The one on Hawthorne Boulevard. You said the backyard had a huge oak tree where you built a tree house with your dad before the divorce. I paused with the glass halfway to my lips. I don't think I told you the name of the street, or about the tree house specifically. He blinked. No, of course I did. On our 3rd date, when we were walking through Discovery Park. You told me about your childhood, weekends with your dad, building that tree house. I searched my memory. I had mentioned the divorce, my mother's house in Portland, but Hawthorne Boulevard. The tree house, I didn't remember those details. Maybe, I finally said. I've talked to you so much that I lose track of what I've said. Exactly. He smiled, reassuringly. We've connected so much that it all blends together, right? I relaxed again. It made sense. We had talked for hours, multiple conversations. It was natural to forget what I had shared when we had pasta for dinner, which Ethan cooked, surprisingly well, had another drink, and decided to play a board game he found in the closet. Trivial Pursuit, old edition. It was fun, competitive. Ethan was good, really good. He answered correctly in categories I dominated: literature, art, history. How do you know so much about modernist architecture? I asked when he answered correctly about Frank Lloyd Wright. I researched it when we started dating. I wanted to be able to have interesting conversations about your field. He said it so sweetly that I melted. That's incredibly thoughtful. I'd do anything to understand you better, Jess. Jess. No one called me Jess except my close family. I mentioned it to him once, I think, during our first video call, that I hated it when people called me Jessie, but Jess was fine. And here he was, using it naturally. Perfect. Thoughtful. Around midnight, we were both tired. I should go to sleep, I said, getting up from the couch. We can explore the lake tomorrow. Sounds perfect. He got up too, moving closer. May I? He asked, leaning in slightly. Our first kiss. I nodded. It was soft, tentative, sweet. Exactly how a first kiss should be. Good night, Jess, he whispered. Good night, Ethan. I went up to my room, my heart light. I sent Rachel a message. Everything perfect, beautiful cabin. Ethan is a gentleman. Talk tomorrow. 3 dots indicating she was typing, then, yay, have fun, use protection. I laughed, locked my phone, and went to bed. I slept deeply, unusually deeply. When I woke up, the sun was high. 10:30 a.m. I never slept so late. I felt groggy, as if I were emerging from thick fog, probably the wine combined with fresh mountain air. I went downstairs in my pajamas, shorts and a t-shirt. Ethan was in the kitchen making coffee. Good morning, Sleeping Beauty. I thought you'd never wake up. Warm smile. Coffee. Please. What time is it? Almost 11. I let you sleep. You seem to need it. He handed me a cup. Perfect coffee. Exactly my favorite shade of light brown. How did you know how much milk I put in? I asked, sipping. Observation. He winked. Our coffee dates. You always order the same thing. Coffee with plenty of milk, no sugar. True. But I felt a slight chill. Small, easy to ignore. We had breakfast. Ethan had made pancakes, my favorite, and decided to walk along the path around the lake. It was beautiful. Late March, still cold, but the sun was warm. We walked hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. He mentioned that his brother, the one in the military, was stationed in Germany. It must be hard on your parents, I said. Especially your mom, Pat, right? You said she was very close to him. Ethan nodded. Yeah, she misses James terribly, but she keeps busy with her garden. She loves growing roses. I didn't remember him mentioning his mother's name, Pat, or that she liked roses. But then again, we had talked about so much. I was being paranoid for no reason, except I couldn't shake the feeling. Little details I didn't remember sharing. The way he said them so naturally, like established facts. Was I going crazy, or was something wrong? That evening, we cooked together. He made salmon, your favorite fish, he said, with asparagus. True, I liked salmon. But had I told him it was my favorite? I searched our message history later when he went to the bathroom. I scrolled through weeks of conversation. I never specifically mentioned salmon. I mentioned that I liked fish, but not salmon in particular. When he came back, I quickly closed my phone. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, just checking work messages. Not true, but something was twisting in my stomach. Something was wrong. I didn't know what exactly, but my instincts, silent for weeks of romance, were starting to scream. We had dinner. Ethan poured more wine. To relax, he said. I drank little, pretending to sip. I wanted to keep my mind clear. He drank more, visibly relaxing. We moved to the sofa in front of the fireplace. He put his arm around me. It felt different now. Not comforting, restrictive. "Jess, I have to say something," he began. "I feel like I really know you. More than anyone before. Like we were meant to find each other. Do you feel the same way?" It's been fast," I said carefully. "But yes, there is a connection. Not just a connection. It's more than that. It's like we're soulmates." His eyes shone with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "I know things about you that no one else knows. Little details that make you who you are. Like that scar on your left knee from falling off your bike when you were 7. Or how you sing in the shower, but only when no one can hear you. Or how you look out your office window every afternoon at 3 p.m. because the sun hits the buildings in a way that you love." My blood ran cold. Those things, I'd never told him. Never. The scar was always covered by jeans. Singing in the shower was private. And my office window. How the hell did he know that? "How do you know those things?" I asked, my voice coming out higher than I intended. "Because I pay attention. Because I care about you. Because I've spent time learning every detail of your life." He said it as if it were romantic. As if it were proof of love. "Ethan, that's not normal. I didn't tell you about my scar. Or about singing in the shower. And definitely not about my office window." I moved away from him on the couch. "How do you know those things?" His expression changed. The warmth drained away, replaced by something colder. More calculated. "Jessica, calm down. I'm just showing you how much I care about you. How much I've observed you. How much I understand you." Observed. The word was like ice running down my spine. "What do you mean, observed?" "Watched, studied, learned. I wanted to be perfect for you, so I made sure I knew everything about you before we officially met." He stood up, walking toward the window. "That's true love, Jess. Dedication, commitment." I stood up too, panic rising in my throat. "Before we met. What does that mean? We met on Hinge. We matched." "Well, technically yes. But I knew you before that. I first saw you 4 months ago, at the coffee shop near your office. You were working on your laptop, so focused. You ordered a latte, sat by the window. I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I needed to meet you. I needed to have you." The terror was visceral. "You've been stalking me. 4 months. Before Hinge. Before everything. This was planned. Planned by fate." He turned to me, eyes shining with a fervor I now recognized as obsession. "I saw your LinkedIn profile. I researched where you worked. I started going to the places you frequented. The coffee shop, the gym, the bookstore where you buy books on Saturdays, your grocery store. I learned your routine, your tastes, your friends, everything. That's illegal. That's harassment." My voice trembled. "I need to leave. Now." I moved toward the stairs to grab my things. "Jess, wait." He grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firmly. "You don't understand. I did all this for us. I created the perfect profile on Hinge because I knew exactly what you would be looking for. Civil engineer, because you mentioned in your blog. Yes, I found your old blog, that you admired people who build tangible things. The photos with the dog, because you have photos with dogs on your archived Instagram from 3 years ago. The Murakami book, because I stalked your Goodreads. Everything, every detail designed to make you want to meet me." "Let me go." I said it firmly, trying not to show the terror that was consuming me. He let go, raising his hands. "I wouldn't hurt you. Never. I just want you to understand. This is love. Real love. Not the superficial kind that people find randomly. This was cultivated. Perfected. I made myself your ideal man. You made yourself a lie." I backed away toward the stairs. None of this was real. Our connection, our conversations, it was all manipulation. "It was dedication," he shouted now, frustration cracking his facade. Do you know how much work it took? Months of research, creating fake profiles to follow your social media, hacking your email to learn your way of thinking, bribing the doorman of your building to find out your schedule, installing tracking software on your phone. That time I found it in the coffee shop and returned it to you. Remember that? I remembered. 2 months ago, before I met Ethan. My phone had disappeared from my table at the coffee shop. 10 minutes later, a stranger brought it back. Someone left it in the bathroom, he had said. I thanked him without looking at his face. It was him. He had stolen my phone, installed software, and returned it. All part of the plan. You're sick, I whispered. You need help. I need you. He walked toward me. I ran up the stairs. Jess, please. This was all for this moment, for us to finally be together. I've waited so long. I reached the second floor and ran to my room. I locked the door. I looked for my phone. There was no signal. Of course. Mountains. Isolation. Part of his plan. He knocked on the door. Jess, come out. We can talk about this rationally. There's nothing to talk about. Let me go. I'll open the door if you promise to take me back to Seattle now. Silence. Then, I can't do that. Not yet. You need to understand. You need to see how much I love you. How much we've built together. We haven't built anything. It was all a lie. More silence. Then footsteps walking away. I waited, my heart racing. Had he given up? Would he let me go? My laptop was in the room. I opened it. No Wi-Fi, of course. But I had offline files, documents, nothing useful for escape. I checked my downloaded messages, conversations with Ethan. I reread them with new knowledge. Every question he asked was data mining. Every detail I shared was added to his dossier on me. The manipulation was artistic in its horror. I waited an hour. Silence downstairs. What was he doing? I considered jumping out the window. Second floor. Not lethal, but I'd probably break something. And then what? Miles of forest with no cell service. Walk to the nearest road. How long would that take? What if he followed me? Finally, I gathered my courage. I opened the door quietly. I listened. Nothing. I went down the stairs, step by step, carefully. The living room was empty. The fireplace was dying out. Wine glasses were forgotten. I looked for the car keys. They weren't where Ethan had left them in the bowl in the entryway. I moved toward the kitchen. Empty too. Where was he? I looked for a knife. I grabbed the biggest one from the block. I didn't want to use it. But if I had to... Are you looking for this? His voice came from behind me. I turned around. He was standing in the doorway leading to the basement holding his keys. I can't let you go yet, Jess. Not until you understand. Ethan, this has to end. Now. Or I'll call the police as soon as I get a signal. And what will you tell them? That your boyfriend brought you to a romantic cabin? That you've been here willingly? There's no crime, Jess. Just unrequited love. Stalking, invasion of privacy, hacking. I raised the knife. Stay away from me. He raised his hands but smiled. You wouldn't hurt me. You're not violent. I know that. I read your 2019 online diary, where you wrote about your aversion to violence after seeing a bar fight. I know who you are, Jess. Better than you are. He was right. Damn it, he was right. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stab him, no matter the danger. I wasn't that kind of person. Just let me go, please. I promise I won't report you. I just want to go home. Jess. His expression softened. I don't want to scare you. That was never the plan. The plan was for you to fall in love with me naturally, believing it was perfect coincidence. And it worked, didn't it? You were falling in love. I saw it in your eyes, in your messages to Rachel where you said you'd finally found the one. You read my messages to Rachel. I read everything. Your emails, messages, your calendar. I know about your client meeting next Tuesday. I know your sister calls you every Sunday. I know you're worried about your mother because she's considering selling the house in Portland. I know everything, Jess. And that should make you feel loved, not scared. The tears finally came, from frustration, terror, violation. That's not love. It's control. It's sickness. It's dedication. He moved closer. And I'm not the first to do this. You think you're special? You're the fifth. The world stopped. What? The fifth woman I've done this with. The other four. It didn't work out. They didn't understand at first either, but eventually... He paused, smiling in a way that chilled me. Eventually they understood. Or they stopped mattering. What did you do to them? The knife almost fell from my hands. 3. I eventually let go. When they stopped being interesting. When they didn't match what I thought. It was disappointing. So much wasted work. The 4th. He paused. She got difficult. Like you now. She had to be handled differently. You killed her. I could barely say the words. Don't be dramatic. She just disappeared. Her family assumed she ran away. New identity. It happens all the time. Cold cases, they call them. The horror was complete. Not only was he crazy, he was dangerous, deadly dangerous. Ethan, please. Let me go. I won't say anything. I swear. Just let me go. I can't, Jess. I've invested too much in you. 4 months of work, of planning, of becoming your perfect man. I won't waste that. He moved closer. But we can work this out. Stay the weekend. Let me show you that this can work. That we're perfect together. And if at the end of Sunday you still want to leave, we'll discuss it. He was lying. I saw it in his eyes. He had no intention of letting me go. If I stayed until Sunday, something bad would happen. Something final. I need to go to the bathroom, I said suddenly. Just that. Then, we can talk. He hesitated. Fine. But leave the knife. I placed it slowly on the counter. I walked to the bathroom downstairs, feeling his eyes following me. I closed. The door. Small window, but maybe enough. I opened it. Narrow. It was difficult, but I managed to squeeze through, scraping my arms. I fell into the bushes outside. Sharp pain, but adrenaline drowned it out. I ran toward the forest, toward anywhere far from the cabin. I heard him shouting my name behind me. Jessica, come back, you're just going to hurt yourself. The forest was dense. Branches tore at my clothes, my skin. I didn't care. I ran until my lungs burned. Then I walked fast. Then I hid behind a fallen tree, trying to get my bearings. The lake was on my right. I needed to get to the road. Was it north, west? I had lost my sense of direction in the panic. I heard footsteps, twigs snapping. Jess, this is ridiculous. You're going to get lost. It's cold. You don't have a coat. Come back. I promise we'll just talk. His voice was calm, reasonable, but I knew the truth. I stood still, shallow breathing. He walked close by, so close I could have touched him. He kept going. I waited until his footsteps faded. Then I moved in the opposite direction. I walked for what seemed like hours. The cold was biting. My light clothing was inadequate. I was starting to shiver violently, but I couldn't go back. Dying of hypothermia was better than what he had planned. Finally, I saw lights. The highway. I emerged from the woods, hugging myself against the cold. A car passed by. I waved my arms frantically. It stopped. An older couple. The woman rolled down the window. Are you okay, dear? You're bleeding. Please, I need help. Someone... My date. He's got me trapped. Please take me to the nearest police station. They called the police immediately. They gave me a blanket, water. We waited. Patrol cars arrived in 20 minutes. I told them everything. The harassment, the manipulation, the cabin, the confession about the other women. I gave them the exact address. They went to the cabin. Ethan had fled. His Subaru was gone. But he left things behind. His laptop on the kitchen table, forgotten in his rush to find me. The officers confiscated it. What they found was complete, years of work, not just about me. Folders, files labeled with women's names. Date 1, Melissa. Date 2, Amanda. Date 3, Tara. Date 4, Kiara, and me. Date 5, Jessica. Each folder contained exhaustive dossiers, photos taken without permission, stolen documents, hacked emails, tracked schedules, months or years of surveillance on each woman, profiles designed specifically to attract us. The same process, replicated 5 times with different victims. Kiara, the 4th, reported missing 8 months ago in Washington State. Unsolved case. In Ethan's folder, notes on disposal and GPS coordinates in a remote forest. Police sent search teams. They found remains. Identification confirmed a week later. He had killed Kiara when she resisted, and he had planned to do the same to me if I didn't cooperate. Ethan, whose real name was Daniel Reeves, 38 years old, no prior record, was arrested 3 days later in Canada while attempting to cross the border. Extradited, charged with first-degree murder, aggravated stalking, kidnapping, multiple counts of invasion of privacy. The trial was 2 months ago. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I testified. I told everything. The other 3 women, Melissa, Amanda, and Tara, also testified. All survivors who didn't know they were part of a pattern until the police contacted them. Each with a similar story. They met the perfect man online, who turned out to be a calculated nightmare. During my testimony, Daniel looked at me, not with hatred, with disappointment, as if I had ruined something beautiful instead of escaping from a monster. It's been 8 months since that night at the cabin. I'm in intensive therapy, PTSD, paranoia, hypervigilance. I can't use dating apps. I probably never will again. Every interaction with strangers is tinged with suspicion. Do they know too much? Are they manipulating me? Are they who they say they are? I changed all my passwords. I checked every device for malware. I made everything private on social media. I still feel like I'm being watched, even though I know rationally that Daniel is in prison. That doesn't erase the trauma of knowing that I spent months being studied, dissected, turned into the object of a sick obsession. Kiara's family contacted me to thank me. My escape led to their daughter being found, their case being closed, them finally getting answers. I appreciate their gratitude, but I feel guilty. If only I had seen the signs earlier. If only I had trusted my instincts when he started mentioning things I didn't remember telling him. Maybe. My therapist says it wasn't my fault, that Daniel was a sophisticated predator, that his other victims also missed the signs because he was an expert manipulator. Melissa had been with him for 3 months before she became suspicious. Amanda, 2 months. Tara, 6 weeks. Me, only 3 weeks before the cabin, before everything fell apart. Rachel says I'm a hero, that I saved my own life and helped lock up a monster. But I don't feel heroic. I feel broken. Raped not physically, but in every way that matters. My privacy, my autonomy, my ability to trust my own judgment. The worst part is knowing how close I came to falling in love with him, to believing he was perfect, because he was, perfectly designed. Every word, every gesture, every shared interest calculated to make me want exactly what he pretended to be, and it worked, until it didn't. Now I live with the knowledge that romance can be a weapon, that connection can be control, that someone can steal your life without ever touching your body. Daniel Reeves taught me that monsters don't always have claws. Sometimes they have warm smiles, charming conversation, and a dating profile designed with surgical precision. And sometimes, your ideal guy is exactly that because someone spent months building that illusion. I'm alive. I survived. But part of me will always be in that cabin, that moment of horrible realization when I understood that it was all a lie. That moment when the perfect man became the perfect nightmare. And the worst thought, the one that keeps me awake at night. If I hadn't escaped, if I had stayed until Sunday like he wanted, would date 5 have been the one that finally worked out? Or would I have ended up like Kiara, buried in a remote forest with only GPS coordinates marking my grave. I'll never know. And that uncertainty, that brush with something much worse than what I experienced, is perhaps the most lasting horror of all. Are because I survived, but Kiara didn't, and I could easily have been her. My name is Ren Ashford, and I am 33 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened 11 months ago in a rural house in Vermont, but I still cannot sleep without checking every inch of my room before turning off the lights. My therapist says that writing it down will help me process it. I don't know if she's right, but here I am, trying to articulate the night that changed everything. The night I met Beckett. The night I learned that walls have eyes. It was December, just before Christmas. I had met Beckett Lowell 3 weeks earlier on a dating app. Not normally my style. I preferred to meet people organically, but after 2 years of pandemic and isolation, my social options were limited. Beckett seemed perfect on screen. 35 years old, architect, casually handsome with tousled dark hair and an easy smile. Our conversations flowed naturally. Not forced, not awkward, genuine. After 2 weeks of messaging and 3 video calls, he suggested something different. How about we rent a cabin for a night? Something cozy with a fireplace. We can cook together, drink wine, get to know each other without the distractions of the city. It was bold for a first in-person date, but something in his tone made it sound adventurous rather than presumptuous. Separate bedrooms, of course, just a way to escape the noise. I should have said no. I should have insisted on a public date first, but there was something seductive about the idea. Romance, isolation, the possibility of real connection. I said yes. Beckett found the place. Holloway Retreat, a country house in rural Vermont, 2 hours north of Burlington. The photos showed a 2-story dark wood house with large windows, a stone fireplace, and a rustic but modern kitchen. The ad promised total privacy on 5 wooded acres. Reviews were mostly positive. Beautiful place, very peaceful, perfect for a romantic getaway. The host left the house spotless. One 3-star review mentioned strange noises at night, but attributed them to the old house settling. We booked for Friday, December 17th. I told my sister Sparrow, yes, our parents were hippies, exactly where I was going, with whom, and sent her all of Beckett's information plus the address of the house. Basic precautions, I explained. She approved but made me promise to send messages every few hours. And if you feel anything strange, anything at all, you leave. Understood? I promised. Beckett picked me up at 4 p.m. He drove a gray Volvo sedan, clean and reliable. He opened the passenger door for me, first impression positive. He was exactly like his photos. Tall, slender, warm brown eyes, that slightly tousled hair that looked natural. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray wool sweater. Ren, finally in person, he said, smiling genuinely. Ready for adventure? Ready, I replied, getting in. My small suitcase went in the trunk next to his. The trip was pleasant. Easy conversation about work. I was a freelance illustrator, music, books. He put on an indie folk playlist that I liked. The roads became narrower and windier as we entered rural Vermont. The woods grew thicker, the sun began to set. We arrived at Holloway Refuge, just as twilight tinged the sky with dark purple. The house was exactly like the photos. A 2-story dark wood structure with a sloping roof, surrounded by tall pine trees. Isolated. No neighboring houses in sight. The gravel driveway ended at a small parking lot next to the house. Wow, I said as we got out. It's really remote. Total privacy, Beckett replied with that smile. No one to bother us. The host, according to the listing, was named Thane Mercer. He had left check-in instructions. The key would be in a lockbox next to the front door, code 4792. Beckett opened it and took out the key. Inside the lockbox was also a handwritten note. Welcome to Holloway Retreat. I hope you enjoy your stay. The house is yours. If you need anything, my number is on the refrigerator. TM. We went inside. The interior was warm and inviting. A spacious living room with a stone fireplace, brown leather sofa, woven rugs, an open kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Wooden stairs led up to the second floor. Everything was clean, tidy, exactly as promised. "It's perfect," I said, setting my suitcase down by the door. Beckett was already exploring, turning on lights, checking the fireplace. "2 bedrooms upstairs," he reported. "Full bathroom between them. You pick first?" We went upstairs. The stairs creaked slightly under our weight. Normal for an old house. Upstairs was a short hallway with 3 doors, 2 bedrooms, and the bathroom. I chose the room with the window facing the forest. Queen-size bed with a red plaid bedspread, nightstand with an antique lamp, dark wood wardrobe. "I'll take the other one," Beckett said. "Shall we settle in and cook something?" We went downstairs. Beckett had brought ingredients for pasta and salad. We cooked together, conversation flowing easily, drinking red wine from a bottle he had also brought. It felt right, natural, as if we had known each other longer than 3 weeks. We ate dinner at the wooden table by the window, overlooking the dark forest. Outside, only darkness and occasional silhouettes of pine trees against the starless sky. Snow had begun to fall lightly. "This is perfect," Beckett said, raising his glass. "To memorable first dates." "To adventures," I replied, toasting him. We were halfway through dinner when we heard something. A thudding sound from above, like footsteps. We both stopped, looking up at the ceiling. "Did you hear that?" Beckett asked. "Yes." My heart quickened slightly. It sounded like footsteps. "Probably the heating," I said, trying to rationalize. "Or the house settling. Old houses make noise." Beckett nodded, but I noticed his expression was less relaxed. True, although it sounded pretty clear. We continued eating, but the mood had changed. We were both more alert, listening. There were no more noises for the rest of dinner. Afterward, we moved to the sofa in front of the fireplace that Beckett had lit. We sat close, but not touching, still in that tentative stage of a first physical date. We talked about families, pasts, dreams. He was an only child, his parents divorced. He had studied architecture at Cornell. He was passionate about sustainable design. It all fit with what he had told me in messages. "We should take a photo," he suggested around 10 p.m., to remember our first official date. He took out his phone. We moved closer, and he extended his arm for a selfie. The flash lit up the room. "Perfect," he said, looking at the screen. He showed it to me. We looked good together, smiling genuinely. "Send it to me," I asked. He sent it via text message. When I opened it on my phone to get a better look, I noticed something. In the background, barely visible, in the antique mirror above the fireplace, there was something. A shadow. A shape. Not clear, but it definitely looked like a human silhouette. Behind us in the reflection where no one should have been. "Beckett," I said slowly. "Look at the photo again. In the mirror." He zoomed in on the image, squinting. His expression changed. Is someone there?" We turned simultaneously toward the mirror. Empty. Just our own reflections and the room behind us. But in the photo, there was clearly something. Someone. "It's just a camera glitch," I said, but my voice came out less convincing than I intended. "Pareidolia. Our brains see faces in random patterns." "Ren, that's not pareidolia. That looks like a person." Beckett stood up, looking around the room. "Is anyone here?" he called. Silence, just the crackling of the fire. "Maybe we should check the house," I suggested, even though every cell in my body wanted to do the opposite. "Stay still. Don't investigate. Ignore it." But Beckett was already moving. We checked the entire living room, kitchen, first-floor bathroom. Nothing. We went upstairs. The stairs creaked louder now, as if the house was warning us. We checked both bedrooms. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. Closets. Empty. "There's no one here," Beckett concluded, but his posture was tense. It must have been a trick of the light or something on the camera lens. "Yeah," I agreed, wanting to believe it. We're being paranoid. Isolated houses in the woods, horror movies, you know. We tried to relax again, but the atmosphere had changed irreversibly. Every creak in the house made us jump. The wind banging on the windows sounded like someone trying to get in. We decided to go to bed early. "If you need anything, knock on my door," Beckett said before we parted in the second-floor hallway. "And Ren, it's probably nothing. But if you hear anything strange, don't investigate it alone. Come get me." "Same to you," I replied. In my room, I closed the door without locking it. There wasn't a lock, and changed into my pajamas. I checked my phone. Message from Sparrow. "How's it going?" I replied, "Fine. The house is beautiful but a little creepy at night. Talk to you tomorrow." I didn't mention the photo. I didn't want to worry her unnecessarily. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. Every sound was amplified in the silence. The wind, the house settling. And then, around 1 a.m., I heard it clearly. Footsteps. Not upstairs this time, in the hallway, right outside my door. I sat up abruptly in bed, my heart racing. The footsteps continued, slow, measured. They stopped in front of my door. I waited, holding my breath. Was it Beckett? Why wasn't he knocking? "Beckett," I called softly. There was no answer. The footsteps moved away, toward the stairs, down. I got out of bed and opened my door carefully. The hallway was dark. Beckett's door was closed. Had he gone downstairs? I walked quietly to his door and knocked softly. "Beckett." His voice came from inside, sleepy and confused. "Ren, what's wrong?" He opened the door, obviously just awake, hair tousled, eyes sleepy. "I heard footsteps in the hallway," I whispered. "I thought it was you, but you were asleep." His expression hardened. "I haven't left my room." He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, activating the flashlight. "Let's check." We went downstairs together. The first floor was silent. The fireplace was dying down, red embers glowing faintly. We checked every corner again. Nothing. No one. "Ren, this is weird," Beckett finally said. "Really weird. Do you want to leave? We can pack up and go now." Part of me wanted to scream yes, but another part, the rational part, the part that didn't want to seem hysterical, thought we were overreacting. "It's the middle of the night. The roads are snowy. We can't drive safely now," I paused. "Let's stay until morning, but maybe we should leave the doors open so we can hear each other if something happens." He nodded. "Good idea." We went back upstairs. We left both bedroom doors wide open. I couldn't sleep after that. I lay awake, staring into the darkness of the hallway, every sense hyperactive. At 3:30 a.m., I heard something different. Not footsteps, a creaking sound. Continuous, as if someone were moving inside the walls. Impossible, obviously. But the sound was unmistakable. It was coming from the closet in my room. I got up, approaching cautiously. The closet was simple, 2 wooden doors, shelves inside where I had hung my jacket. I opened the doors slowly. Clothes. Empty shelves, but the back wall. It looked slightly different from the rest, newer. The paint color didn't quite match. I tapped the wall. It sounded hollow, as if there was space behind it. "Beckett," I called in a trembling voice. He appeared in seconds, also unable to sleep. "What?" "Listen to this." I tapped the back wall of the closet. Hollow sound. Then I tapped the side wall. Solid. There's space behind it, like, I don't know. A hollow. Another room. Beckett tapped it too, confirming. Old houses sometimes have weird spaces. Irregular architectural design. But his voice lacked conviction. He pushed the wall, it didn't budge. It's probably just weird construction. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The sound I had heard. The creaking, as if someone was moving around in a narrow space. "Beckett, I think there's someone in the walls." He looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "Ren, that's... No one lives in the walls. This isn't a horror movie." "Then explain the footsteps, the figure in the photo. The sounds. Everything. My voice rose, panic bleeding into it. I can't explain it, but there are rational explanations. There have to be. But even he sounded unsure. We went back downstairs, this time with a mission. To check every inch. To look for hidden doors, panels, secret entrances. The house was from the mid-1800s according to the listing. It could have architectural features that weren't obvious. In the living room, Beckett noticed something. Behind a large bookcase, a wall panel that looked slightly different. We moved the bookcase. Heavy. It took both of us pushing. Behind it was a door. Small, painted the same color as the wall, almost invisible. No handle. Just a small hole where a handle had once been. "Here," Beckett said, his voice tense. He stuck his fingers in the hole and pulled. The door opened with a groan, complete darkness behind it. He used his phone as a flashlight, illuminating a narrow passageway. Stairs leading down. "A basement," I whispered. "Or a bunker. Many old houses have underground storage spaces." But his hand was shaking as he held the phone. We didn't want to go down. Every instinct screamed not to, but we needed to know. Beckett went first, me behind him, close to him. The stairs were steep, narrow. They smelled of damp earth and something else, something organic and unpleasant. The basement was larger than expected. Low ceiling, dirt floor, stone walls, and there were things, not random storage items, specific things. A dirty mattress in the corner, a folding table with a laptop, stacks of canned food, bottles of water, a bucket I didn't want to examine too closely. Someone lived here. "Oh my God," I whispered to Beckett. His flashlight swept across the room, falling on something that made us both recoil. The walls. They were covered with photos. Dozens of photos. Hundreds, maybe. Of guests, couples, individuals, families, everyone in this house. All photographed without their knowledge, sleeping, eating, in intimate moments. The invasion was complete and repulsive. And then the flashlight fell on a recent section, photos from that night, of us. Arriving, cooking, on, the couch, the selfie we took, and others we didn't know existed, from impossible angles, from inside the walls. "We have to go, now," Beckett said, his voice shaking. "Whoever lives here, they're here, in the house, watching us." We turned to go upstairs. The door at the top closed. We heard the bolt click. "No!" Beckett shouted, running upstairs, pounding on the door. "Open up! Let us out!" Silence. Then a voice, male, calm, from the other side of the door. "You shouldn't have come down. It was my private space." "Who are you?" I shouted. "Are you Thane? The owner?" "I am the only real owner of this house. The guests are temporary visitors. I like to observe, to learn, to document human behavior when they think they're alone." He paused. "You were particularly interesting. First date. So much romantic potential. What a shame you had to ruin it by being nosy." "Let us out," Beckett demanded. "Now, or we'll call the police." Chuckle. "With what phones?" "Oh wait, your phones are upstairs, in your jacket pockets, which are hanging up, in the kitchen, out of reach." He was right. In the panic of exploring, we had left our phones upstairs. Stupid mistake. Fatal mistake. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Money. Can we pay you?" "I don't want money. I want you to stay put. In a few hours, when I'm sure you won't cause any trouble, I'll let you go. But you have to learn. You don't trespass on other people's property. You don't invade privacy." The irony of those words, coming from someone who had photographed us without permission, was nauseating. Beckett and I looked at each other in the darkness. His flashlight was dying. "We have to get out," he whispered. "That door isn't solid. We could break it." "Or there's another way out," I said, remembering the layout. Old basements sometimes have outside access, for coal or deliveries. We searched, the flashlight flickering, dying. In the opposite corner, we found something. Another door, smaller. It opened to an even narrower passage. We crawled through. It emerged into a space I recognized, the area under the main stairs on the first floor. We could see light seeping through the cracks. We pushed. The panel gave way. We emerged into the first floor hallway. Clear. "Run!" Beckett shouted. We ran toward the front door. Locked. Obviously. Windows. We tried to open one. Locked from the outside. Beckett grabbed a chair and threw it at the glass. It bounced off. Reinforced glass. Footsteps behind us. We turned around. A figure emerged from the shadows. An older man, in his 60s, thin, with unkempt gray hair and dark clothes. He was holding something. A gun. "I told you not to cause any trouble," said Thane Mercer. It had to be him. "Now everything is complicated." "We just want to leave," said Beckett, hands up. "We won't say anything, just let us go." "I can't do that. You know too much. You saw too much." Thane looked at us with something like disappointment. "You're contaminated now. You can't be released cleanly." "What happened to the others?" I asked, thinking of the photos. All those people. Did they all go cleanly? Most of them. They never know I was there. They look at the photos afterwards, some notice strange things, but no one comes back. They write reviews about weird noises and get on with their lives. He smiled, not warmly, but with clinical satisfaction. "But you had to investigate. You had to invade my space. Now you're a problem." Beckett moved fast, lunging at Thane. They wrestled. The gun fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Beckett fell. Blood blossomed on his chest. He didn't scream. He just made a guttural sound and collapsed. "Beckett," I shouted, kneeling beside him. His eyes were open, staring at me with surprise and pain. "No, no, no." I pressed my hands against the wound. Warm blood soaked my fingers. "What a waste," Thane said behind me. "It really was unnecessary." I looked at Beckett, his breathing becoming shallow. "Hang on," I whispered. "I'm going to get us out of here." A lie. I didn't know how, but I needed him to believe. "Ren," his voice barely audible. "Run." His eyes clouded over. His breathing stopped. No, he couldn't be dead. We had just met. This was going to be the start of something. And now. "Get up," Thane ordered. Slowly. I stood up, hands up, still covered in Beckett's blood. "What are you going to do with me?" "Clean up," he said simply. "You and him are going to be a tragic accident. Young couple rents remote house. Something goes wrong. Faulty gas, perhaps. Or fatal fall from stairs. The details will be perfected. But the story will be, they died. Tragically. And I, the poor shocked landlord, will report it when I come to check after they didn't check out. People know we're here. My sister, friends. They'll look for us. And they'll find an accident, not murder. I'm very good at covering tracks." He gestured with the gun. "Basement now, while I decide on the specific method." I didn't move. My mind was racing. If I went down to the basement, I was dead. I needed time. I needed leverage. "Thane," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You don't have to do this. I'm nobody. A freelance designer with no family nearby, nobody important. I can disappear voluntarily. Say I ran away. New life. Never mention this." He considered. Tempting, but unreliable. Too much risk. He waved the gun. "Basement. Last warning." I moved slowly toward the stairs, leading down. My mind was racing. The laptop was in the basement. If I could reach it, I could send a message, but he would be right behind me. I wouldn't stand a chance. Then I remembered. The other passageway. The one that brought us back under the stairs. If I could get there. First, close the panel behind me. I went down the stairs. Thane behind me. When I reached the bottom, I lunged toward the corner where the mattress was. I rolled behind it, grabbing the only thing I saw, a rusty screwdriver from the table. Not much against a gun, but something. "Don't be dramatic," Thane said, circling around. "This can be quick or slow. Your choice." I threw the screwdriver, not aiming at him, but at the light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Glass exploded. Complete darkness. I ran, toward where I remembered the passageway was, hands outstretched. I found the panel, opened it, crawled in. Behind me, Thane was shouting, phone, flashlight turning on, light sweeping. I crawled fast, chest hitting the narrow floor. I came out under the stairs. I got up, running toward where? All exits blocked. Reinforced windows, door locked, upstairs, second floor. Maybe the bedroom window wasn't reinforced. I ran up the stairs, 3 at a time. I entered my room. I grabbed the bedside lamp and threw it at the window. The glass shattered. Cold air rushed in. I looked outside. 2 stories up, snow below, forest beyond. Jumping meant probable injury, but possible survival. Staying meant certain death. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Thane arriving. I climbed onto the windowsill, broken glass cutting my hands. I looked down. Too high, too dark. But I had no choice. I jumped. The impact was brutal. I landed in snow, but the ground beneath was hard. Something cracked in my ankle. Blinding pain. But I was outside. Free. I stood up, staggering, my ankle screaming. I limped toward the forest. Deep snow made every step agony. Behind me, I heard Thane shouting from the window. "You won't get far. You're hurt. It's below freezing. You'll freeze to death before you find help." Maybe he was right, but I'd rather freeze to death than die by a bullet. I ran, or rather I crawled desperately. The forest was a black labyrinth, branches whipping my face, snow soaking my pajamas, the cold biting through the adrenaline, my ankle useless, every step torture. Behind me, I heard an engine. Thane had come out in a vehicle, following me, flashlight beams sweeping the forest. I hid behind a fallen tree, my breath clouding in the air, my fingers already numb. How long could I survive like this? The engine stopped, footsteps crunching in the snow. "Ren, be reasonable. You'll come back with me or you'll die here. At least with me, it's quick. Hypothermia is prolonged agony." I remained motionless. He passed by, close. His flashlight swept nearby but didn't find me. He continued on. The footsteps faded away. I waited, shaking uncontrollably now. I couldn't stay still or I would die. I needed to keep moving, find a road, flag down a car. I forced myself to get up. Every movement was agony. I continued. Random direction, just away from the house. I don't know how long I was there. An hour, 2. Time lost meaning. Only cold. Pain. Darkness. My mind was beginning to cloud over. Stage of hypothermia. I knew this. Read about it. People start to feel warm, sleepy, paradoxically taking off their clothes. A precursor to death. I fought against it. I kept moving, 1 foot, then another, even though I didn't know where I was going. Then I saw lights, not a flashlight. Car lights. A road. I'd found the road. I crawled toward it, emerging from the woods just as a pickup truck passed by. I waved wildly. He braked. The window rolled down. Middle-aged man, alarmed expression. "Miss, what the hell?" "Please," my voice barely working. "Help. Call the police. Holloway shelter. Dead man, crazy owner, please." He pulled me into his truck, the heat hitting my frozen skin like needles. He called 911 as he drove toward the nearest town. I was fading in and out, words coming out in bursts as I tried to explain. The police went to Holloway Refuge. They found Beckett's body where he fell. They found the basement, the photos, the evidence of years of Thane watching guests. They found space between the walls on the second floor, literally passages built into the original architectural design of the house, where Thane moved, watched, photographed. They didn't find Thane. He had fled. So had his vehicle. Arrest warrant issued, extensive search, nothing. He disappeared as completely as a ghost. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, severe hypothermia, broken ankle, glass cuts, psychological trauma. Spartrow came. My parents, all horrified. Beckett's family. I have no words. His mother blamed me. "If you hadn't gone to that house," she was right in a way. But also, How could we have known? The investigation continued. They discovered that Thane Mercer wasn't his real name. He was Theodore Maddox, 58, with a record of voyeurism and harassment from 20 years earlier. He had been operating this Airbnb under a false identity for 3 years. Dozens of guests, hundreds of hours of surveillance. Most never knew. Some, as I mentioned, left reviews about strange noises but never investigated further. 1 or 2 reported feeling watched but without evidence. Only we had discovered the truth, and it cost us everything. A month after the incident, while still in intensive care, I received a strange notification from Airbnb. It said that the Holloway refugee listing had been updated with a new host photo. Morbidly curious, I opened the link. My blood ran cold. The photo of the host was now Beckett. His face, smiling, the same smile from our first video calls. Below, "Welcome to Holloway Refuge. Your host, Beckett Lowell, looks forward to making your stay unforgettable." I called Airbnb in a panic. They said there had been no update. The listing had been permanently removed after the incident. "Miss Ashford, there is no new photo. The listing does not exist." But I had seen it. I had it on my screen. I took a screenshot. I sent it to them. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, that's not possible. Our system doesn't allow changes to closed listings, especially criminal listings. We're going to look into it. I never got a satisfactory answer. They said it was probably a glitch, a corrupted file. My phone showing old cache mixed with a new image from some other listing. But I know what I saw. A photo of Beckett, my Beckett, dead a month ago, now host of the place where he was murdered. Thane was never caught. He remains a fugitive. Occasionally there are alleged sightings, Vermont, New Hampshire, even one in Oregon, but nothing confirmed. And I live with the knowledge that there is a man out there who saw me at my most vulnerable, who has photos of me, who knows every detail of that night, who could at any moment decide to finish what he started. I don't use Airbnb. Obviously, I can barely enter unfamiliar houses. I check every space before I relax. I knock on walls looking for holes. I inspect mirrors looking for hidden cameras. My life is functional paranoia, and every time I see a mirror for a second, I expect to see a figure behind me, watching, like in that photo. The one that should have been a warning, the one we ignored because we wanted to believe that everything was fine, but nothing was fine, and it would never be again, because I learned a fundamental truth. In the age of the sharing economy and rented spaces, you never really know who is watching you. You never really know what is hidden in the walls of strange places. And you are never, ever really alone, even when you think you are, especially when you think you are. The walls have eyes, and sometimes they also have inhabitants, waiting, watching, documenting. And when they catch you looking back, well, that's when the real horror begins, and the only one who ends up is you. My name is Lawana Kirkland, and I am 29 years old. What I am about to tell you happened 4 months ago, but my therapist says I need to write it down. She says that articulating the trauma makes it less powerful. I don't know if she's right. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the app's voice, soft, calm, telling me exactly what to do, who to be, how to feel. My name is Lawana Kirkland. I am 29 years old. I am an interior designer in Seattle. I like coffee with oat milk. I read before bed. These are facts. My therapist says I must repeat them to remember who I am, because for 72 hours, I completely forgot. It all started with Synthesis. Not your average dating app. Synthesis was exclusive by invitation only for professionals seeking deep, authentic connection. I received the invitation in the mail, not email, physical mail, matte black envelope, thick paper with gold embossing. Lona Kirkland, You have been selected to participate in the synthesis experience, a unique opportunity to meet your perfect match in an environment designed for total vulnerability and genuine connection. Inside was an access code to download the app, available by invitation only. There was also a brochure with an elegant minimalist aesthetic. Synthesis is not dating, it is emotional alchemy. Our algorithm uses deep psychology, advanced artificial intelligence, and neuroscience to identify your ideal partner. Then we create a 70-hour immersive experience where you and your match get to know each other free from distractions from the outside world. It sounded intense, but also intriguing. I had been single for 3 years after a long relationship that ended badly. Normal dating exhausted me. Superficial conversations, ghosting, incompatibility. What if there really was a scientific way to find the right person? I downloaded the app. The registration questionnaire was exhaustive. Not just, what do you like to do on the weekends, but deep psychological questions. Describe your greatest childhood fear and how it affected your development. What unmet emotional need drives you most in relationships? Rank these scenarios from most to least frightening: abandonment, betrayal, control, irrelevance. It took 3 hours to complete. When I finished, the app said, "Processing. We will notify you when we identify your ideal match." I waited 2 weeks. I had almost forgotten about it when the notification arrived. Match found: Maverick Ashby. Compatibility: 98.7%. Ready for the synthesis experience? I looked at his profile. 32 years old, architect, lived in Portland. Photos showed a relaxed, handsome man. Dark hair, trimmed beard, genuine smile. His partial questionnaire was visible. He answered questions about vulnerability, deep connection, the importance of radical honesty. He seemed perfect. Too perfect. But curiosity won out. I accepted. Instructions arrived immediately. Synthesis. Experience will begin Friday, March 15th at 6 p.m. Location: Synthesis House, North Bend, Washington. Bring clothes for 3 days. No electronic devices allowed except phone. Special mode will be provided. All meals, activities, and experiences are carefully designed. Trust the process. I told my sister Juniper where I was going. 72 hours locked up with a stranger? She questioned. Luana, that sounds like voluntary kidnapping. I laughed. It's a legitimate app. It has reviews, certifications, plus we'll be at a house just an hour from Seattle. If something goes wrong, I'll leave. Mistake number 1, assuming I could leave whenever I wanted. On Friday, I arrived in North Bend at 5:30 p.m. Casa Synthesis was modern, all glass and steel, nestled on 5 wooded acres. Beautiful but isolated. There were no neighboring houses in sight. I parked next to a dark gray Audi. Mavericks. There was a digital panel at the front door. Welcome, Lana. Please scan the QR code from your app to enter. I did. The door unlocked with a soft click. I went inside. The interior was impressive. Open space with high ceilings, modern furniture in grays and whites, minimalist art. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the forest darkening. On the kitchen island, 2 glasses of wine already poured, a cheese plate, and a note. Welcome, Lona. Maverick will arrive shortly. Relax. Enjoy the wine. Let Synthesis guide your experience. I picked up my glass and sipped. Excellent Pinot Noir. My phone vibrated. The app. You have entered Casa Synthesis. Your 72-hour experience has begun. Rule 1. Remain in the house until the timer ends. Rule 2. Complete all challenges provided by the app. Rule 3. Radical honesty at all times. Follow them, and you'll find out if Maverick is your person. I heard a door open. I turned around. A man walked in matching the photos. Maverick. Tall, broad shoulders, those warm brown eyes. He smiled. Loana. Maverick, I replied, smiling too. This is surreal. Totally. He approached, took his glass of wine. 72 hours with someone who is supposedly my 98% match. No pressure, right? His tone was light, breaking the tension. We toasted. To the experiment, I said. To the connection, he replied. The first few hours were surprisingly normal. We talked in the living room. He was intelligent, funny, genuine. We shared stories about our careers, families, interests. The chemistry was undeniable. Maybe the algorithm really worked. At 8 p.m., the app notified us, Challenge 1. Vulnerability dinner. Dinner will be waiting for you in the dining room. During the meal, take turns answering the questions on the cards provided. No judging, no defensiveness, just listen. We went to the dining room. The table was elegantly set, gourmet food under steel domes, steak, roasted vegetables, risotto, and a stack of black cards in the center. We sat down. Maverick took the first card and read, "What is the deepest emotional wound from your childhood?" He whistled softly. They get right to the point. He answered first. He talked about his parents' contentious divorce, feeling caught in the middle, developing a need to be the peacemaker that affected all his relationships. He was vulnerable, honest. My turn. The card asked, "When was the last time you felt truly seen?" I answered about a past relationship, how my ex never really knew me, only the idealized version he had created, how I felt invisible even when I was with someone. Maverick reached across the table and took my hand. "I see you now, Luana, and what I see is incredible." The moment was perfect, too perfect. But I let myself go. Challenge 2 came at 10 p.m. Non-sexual intimacy moment. Sit on the couch. One person rests their head on the other's lap. The seated person strokes the other's hair for 10 minutes in silence. Then switch. Let touch communicate what words cannot. "Okay, this is very specific," Maverick said, laughing nervously. "But why not?" We did it. It was strangely intimate, feeling his fingers in my hair, gentle, soothing. Then I did the same to him. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was connective. When it was over, we both felt closer. "This really works," I whispered. "It's a little scary how fast," he admitted. At midnight, the app suggested sleep. 2 rooms are ready upstairs. Rest. Tomorrow we'll continue delving deeper. We went upstairs. 2 bedrooms facing each other. We said goodbye with a long hug. "Good night, Luana." "Good night, Maverick." In my room, I changed into my pajamas and went to bed. The bed was incredibly comfortable, but I couldn't sleep. Something felt observed. I looked around. No obvious cameras, but a noticeable feeling of surveillance. It's a strange house, I told myself. Normal paranoia. Day 2 began with a morning challenge. Have breakfast together in complete silence. No words, only non-verbal communication. 30 minutes. It was strange, but revealing. I learned to read his expressions and gestures. He learned to read mine. When it was over, we both burst out laughing. "That was weird," he said, "but effective," I admitted. Challenge 3. Secret sharing. Each of you share something you've never told anyone. Vulnerability creates intimacy. We sat face to face in the living room. Maverick went first. He told me about a time when he betrayed his best friend to get ahead at work. How guilt consumed him. How he had never admitted it. I shared about the abortion I had at 23. I had never told anyone except my ex-boyfriend who pressured me. The shame, the loss, the conflicting relief. We cried together. We hugged. The connection was intense, fast-paced, artificial in its perfection, but feeling undeniably real. Challenge 4 came in the afternoon. Write letters describing your perfect future together. Be specific. Children, house, careers. Then read them aloud. "Wait," I said, laughing uncomfortably. "Planning a future after 24 hours?" "Trust the process," Maverick said, though his smile wavered. We wrote, we read. The visions were eerily compatible. 2 children. A house in the suburbs with workspaces for both of us. Annual trips to Europe. Everything fit perfectly. Too perfectly. "This feels manipulated," I said aloud for the first time. The app immediately notified. Resistance is natural, Luana. The ego fears vulnerability. Trust the process. The results speak for themselves. Did you see that? I asked Maverick. It responded to my question as if it were listening. There are microphones, he said, looking around. That makes sense. How else would they personalize the experience? But that means they're watching us, hearing everything. We consented when we agreed, he reminded me. The terms and conditions probably mentioned it. He was right, but suddenly the house felt less like a romantic retreat and more like a laboratory. Challenge 5 came at dusk. Dinner in darkness, lights will go out, feed each other without seeing, trust completely. The lights went out automatically. Total darkness. We fed each other blindly, laughing nervously. But something darker lay beneath. Control. The house was controlling us. Lights, temperature, background music we had barely noticed. All programmed. Maverick, I whispered in the darkness. Do you want to leave? Pause. Can we? They said 72 hours. We can try. I got up, groped my way to where I remembered the front door was. I found the handle. I pushed. It didn't budge. Locked. I looked for a deadbolt. There wasn't one. Just a digital panel that now displayed exit disabled during experience. Will unlock in 47 hours, 23 minutes. Panic set in. Real, visceral panic. Maverick, we're locked in. The lights came on abruptly. He was standing there, pale. It has to be a security measure to ensure we complete the experience, or to make sure we can't leave if we want to. My voice rose. This isn't normal. This is prison. The app notified us. Lona, your heart rate is elevated. We detect anxiety. Please breathe deeply. Maverick, please comfort Luana. Panic is counterproductive to connection. How does it know my heart rate? I asked hysterically. Then I remembered. The phone's special mode. They had made us set it up. It probably monitored biometrics. Luana, calm down, Maverick said, approaching me. But now his touch didn't feel comforting. It felt like he was following orders. Don't tell me to calm down. We're trapped. Can't you see that? Challenge 6 appeared. Conflict is natural. Resolution is art. Maverick, hug Lona until her heart rate drops to normal levels. Lona, allow yourself to be comforted. Resistance prolongs discomfort. Maverick hugged me. I fought back at first, then gave in, crying against his chest. Not out of emotional connection, but out of fear, frustration, helplessness. The app. Good. Heart rate normalizing. Let's continue. That night, neither of us slept much. We sat in the living room, talking in whispers, even though we knew they could hear us. What is this really? I asked. Is it an experiment? Are they testing how much control we can take? I don't know, but tomorrow it will be over. We just have to endure. Day 3. The challenges escalated. Challenge 7. Confession of flaws. Each of you list 5 flaws of the other. Be brutally honest. Total acceptance requires seeing flaws and loving anyway. It was cruel, designed to hurt while framed as growth. I told him that he was sometimes condescending, that his need to be a peacemaker was cowardly, not virtuous. He told me that I was controlling, defensive, emotionally closed off. It hurt. It hurt more because it was probably true. And the app monitored, recorded every word, every reaction. Challenge 8. Punishment and forgiveness. Maverick, Lona criticized your character. Express how it hurt you. Lona, kneel and ask for forgiveness. Then Maverick, lift her up and forgive her. Repeat with roles reversed. This is ritual humiliation, I said. I'm not going to kneel. The app. Refusing to complete challenges extends the experience. For each challenge refused, 12 hours are added. Do you want to stay 84 hours instead of 72? Maverick looked at me, distressed. Luana, just do it. Come on, let's just get this over with. So I did. I knelt down. I apologized for cruel words. He lifted me up and said, "I forgive you." Then we reversed roles. He knelt before me. The power dynamic was grotesque, perverse. When it was over, we both felt dirty. This was not connection. It was psychological domination disguised as couples therapy. Challenge 9. Obedience and trust. Lona, Maverick will give you 5 simple commands. Obey them without question. Show that you trust completely. Then reverse roles. Maverick's commands were harmless. Touch your toes. Spin around 3 times. Sing a song. I did it, feeling ridiculous. My commands to him were similar. He obeyed. But the message was clear. They were training us to obey, to follow orders without question. Challenge. 10 was on the night of the 3rd day. Final preparation. Sit in front of the camera in the room. When instructed, repeat the phrases shown on the screen. This solidifies your understanding of the experience. A large screen descended from the wall. We sat on the couch, the camera, now obvious, mounted on the opposite wall, focused on us. Text appeared. My name is Lawana Kirkland. I have completed the synthesis experience. I learned that connection requires total vulnerability. I learned that control is a form of care. I learned that resisting the process only causes suffering. I accept the lessons of synthesis. I trust synthesis to guide my future relationships. I am a better person for having participated. Read aloud, the app commanded, both of you, simultaneously. No, I said. I'm not going to say that. It's brainwashing. The app. Lona, your tone is one of resistance. We have monitored your responses for 68 hours. Your psychological profile indicates a need for control, fear of vulnerability, patterns of self-sabotage in relationships. This experience was designed specifically to help you. Rejecting help is rejecting yourself. Something about those words clicked. Not because they were true, but because they used exactly the language my previous therapist had used. As if they had access to my sessions. Had they hacked my health insurance, my records? How do you know that? I asked, my voice trembling. Synthesis knows. Synthesis optimizes. Synthesis connects. Now read the words, Lana. It's time to accept your transformation. I looked at Maverick. He was already reading, his voice monotone. My name is Maverick Ashby. I have completed the synthesis experience. He continued word for word, without emotion. Maverick, stop, I begged. This isn't us. These aren't our words. He looked at me with empty eyes. I have to finish, Loana. I just have to finish. The app. Loana, Maverick has accepted. Your resistance isolates you. Do you want to be alone, or do you want connection? Read the words, join him, be one. The manipulation was obvious, using my fear of abandonment, which they had extracted in the questionnaire, against me. But knowing the manipulation didn't diminish its effectiveness. 72 hours of sleep deprivation, emotional stress, environmental control had worn me down. My name is Lawana Kirkland, I began, my voice breaking. Every word was a betrayal of myself, but I said them anyway. I have completed the synthesis experience. I learned that connection requires total vulnerability. I continued until the end. When we finished, the screen displayed. Experience complete. Doors will unlock in 15 minutes. Thank you for trusting synthesis. Your data contributes to our understanding of human bonding behavior under controlled conditions. A representative will contact you for follow-up. 15 minutes later, the door unlocked. Maverick left first without looking back. He ran to his car, started it, and drove away. I watched him disappear into the dark road. I couldn't move. I sat on the couch staring at the camera. I knew it was still recording. And something in me, the broken, deprogrammed part, wanted to perform well. I wanted them to know I had learned my lesson. My name is Lawana Kirkland, I said to the camera without anyone asking. I'm 29 years old. I have learned that resistance only causes suffering. I trust synthesis. I am a better person for having participated. The words came out automatically. I didn't even know why I was saying them, only that they felt safe. Right. As if I had finally discovered the script I was supposed to follow my whole life. I stayed there for 30 minutes, repeating the phrases over and over, for the camera, for myself. I was no longer sure of the difference. Finally, I got up. I grabbed my suitcase. I walked to the door. In my car, I drove back to Seattle on autopilot. At home, I tried to return to normal. Work, friends, routines. But something had fundamentally changed. Every decision felt wrong without the app telling me what to do. Every conversation felt superficial without structured challenges. I tried to delete the app. I couldn't. It had integrated itself into my operating system in such a way that standard uninstallation didn't work. Notifications arrived daily. Loana, how are you feeling today? Remember, vulnerability is strength. Control is care. Obedience is peace. Initially, I ignored them. Then I started responding. Then waiting. Needing. I researched synthesis. The website was professional but vague. The terms of service, which I finally read, specified that the experience was a behavioral study for psychological research purposes. Participants consented to complete monitoring, recording, and analysis. And crucially, the data collected would be owned by Synthesis for use in future research. We had been guinea pigs. The dating app was a front for a behavioral control experiment. How much obedience could they induce in 72 hours? How could they fracture identity and reconstruct it according to parameters they established? And it had worked perfectly. I tried to contact Maverick. His profile had disappeared. The number I had was disconnected. It was as if he had never existed outside of those 72 hours. I went to the police. I filed a report. They showed little interest. You signed a contract. You participated voluntarily. You paid for the experience. Wait, I paid. I checked my bank account. Sure enough, there was a $5,000 charge 3 days before the experience. I hadn't authorized it. Or maybe I had, but my memory was hazy. My sister Juniper was terrified. Loana, you don't seem like yourself. You talk like a robot. What did they do to you? They helped me, I replied automatically. I learned that resistance only causes suffering. Synthesis showed me how to connect properly. That's not your voice. Those aren't your words. She was right. But I couldn't tell anymore. The phrases had become mantras, self-perceived truths. My personality was overwritten by their programming. My current therapist, a new one found later, diagnosed complex trauma due to psychological abuse. They used cult techniques, she explained. Isolation, sleep deprivation, behavioral reinforcement, creating dependency. 72 hours is enough to initiate identity deprogramming in vulnerable individuals. Vulnerable, I repeated. Your questionnaire was designed to identify people with specific insecurities, unresolved trauma, a need for external validation. Then they exploited exactly those vulnerabilities. It made sense, everything fit, but knowing the mechanics didn't undo the damage. 4 months have passed. I still struggle with who I am versus who Synthesis programmed me to be. My therapist says recovery takes time, that eventually the real Loana will emerge again. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I find myself whispering, "My name is Loana Kirkland. I have completed the Synthesis experience. I trust Synthesis. I am a better person for having participated." And the worst part of me believes it's true, because that's the true genius of their method. They don't just control you during the experience, they reconfigure you to control yourself afterward, to internalize their messages, to become your own watchdog. The app still sends notifications. Daily. Loana, remember your lessons. Total vulnerability. Control is care. Obedience is peace. Every time I read them, something in me calms down. It feels safe. Right. My therapist says I should block the notifications, destroy the phone if necessary. But I can't. Because without those reminders, who am I? The Lana from before. I can't remember what she was like. The Lana from now. I don't know who that is. I only know what Synthesis told me. I am a better person for having participated. And maybe, after enough repetition, enough time, enough programming, maybe that will become true. Maybe that's what I was always meant to be. And maybe resisting that reality only causes unnecessary suffering. My name is Loana Kirkland. I am 29 years old. I trust Synthesis. I trust Synthesis. I trust Synthesis. Do I trust Synthesis? I'm not sure anymore, but I keep repeating the words anyway, because they're the only thing left that feels like certainty in a world where my own mind is no longer reliable, and that, perhaps, is the most perfect form of control, making you desire your own programming, making you grateful for your own cage, making you love your jailers. Synthesis succeeded, and I was its perfect test subject. My name is Anna. I'm 19 years old, and like many girls my age, I spent too much time on Facebook, browsing other people's profiles in search of something to fill the void left by college and lonely afternoons in my small rented apartment. It was late spring, the air thick with that sticky heat that makes your skin feel exposed, vulnerable. And that's how I felt, exposed in my profile photos, with forced smiles, at parties I didn't remember fondly, vulnerable in my status updates about poetry books I read to feign depth. It was in a fan group for an indie band that I saw him for the first time, a guy named Alex, with a profile picture showing him smiling under sunlight filtered through eucalyptus leaves, his tousled brown hair falling over his blue eyes, a tight t-shirt highlighting his athletic torso. I love how they capture melancholy in their lyrics, he had commented under a post of mine about an album that had marked me in high school. His private message arrived that same night. Hi, Anna. I saw your post and couldn't resist. What's your favorite song? Mine is Echos Rotos, Broken Echoes. It makes me feel less alone. His profile seemed perfect. 19 years old, art student at a nearby university. Photos of backpacking trips along the coast, friends tagged in college events. We talked for hours that first night, his words flowing, witty, with a touch of vulnerability that made me feel special, as if he saw something in me that no one else noticed. You're like a loose verse in a predictable poem, he wrote to me, and I blushed alone in my unmade bed, biting my lip as I replied with heart and laugh emojis. The days turned into weeks of endless chats, shared memes, confessions about broken dreams. He wanted to be an illustrator. I dreamed of writing novels that no one would read, and a subtle flirtation that made me hopeful for the possibility of something real, something that would break the routine of boring classes and cold microwave dinners. He would send me audio messages with his deep, slightly hoarse voice, laughing at my silly jokes, and I would play them over and over again, imagining how it would sound whispered in my ear. We should meet up, he suggested one afternoon, after I told him about my free weekend. There's a cafe in the Central Park, the one with tables under the willow trees. Saturday at 5. Are you up for it? My heart beat with that mixture of nerves and excitement that only 19-year-olds can feel, and I replied with an enthusiastic yes, ignoring the slight twinge of doubt when I noticed that his most recent photos were a little blurry, as if taken with an old phone. I got ready with care, a floral dress that made me feel ethereal, my hair down in waves that smelled of vanilla from my conditioner, and a touch of gloss on my lips that made me smile in the mirror. It's going to be great, I told myself, stepping out into the sun that bathed the city in gold, not imagining that this date would be the beginning of a hell that would devour me alive. The cafe was a charming spot, with the aroma of espresso and freshly baked croissants floating in the air, and tables surrounded by weeping willows that whispered in the breeze like secret confidences. I arrived 5 minutes early, my pulse drumming anxiously in my temples, and ordered a cinnamon latte to calm my nerves, stirring the foam with a teaspoon as I scanned the entrance. He appeared right on time, walking with a relaxed confidence that made me sit up straighter in my chair. Tall, slim, but muscular beneath his blue linen shirt, his hair slicked back to reveal a broad forehead and those blue eyes that were even more intense in person, like deep wells of water that absorbed the light. "Anna," he said, extending his hand with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes in a way that seemed mature, but I attributed to excitement. His skin was warm, rough on his fingertips, as if he worked with his hands, and he kissed me on the cheek with a light touch that left a trace of woody cologne, something old and sophisticated that didn't quite fit with a 19-year-old student. We sat down, and the conversation flowed like in our chats. We talked about music, how art saved us from the mediocrity of the world, and he looked at me with absolute attention, his eyes fixed on my lips as I spoke, nodding with a tilt of his head that made his jaw tense slightly. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, and I noticed how his hands, large, with prominent veins, wrapped around the cup possessively, but I dismissed it as a romantic detail. He laughed at my high school anecdotes, a deep laugh that vibrated in his chest and touched my arm once, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely unpleasant. "You're even prettier in person," he murmured, and I looked down, blushing, feeling that flutter in my stomach that made me believe in happy endings. He paid the bill with a crumpled bill from an inside pocket and suggested a walk in the park. "There's a lake at the end, with ducks that steal bread from the unwary. Let's go." We walked side by side, the sun filtering through the leaves and dancing patches on the gravel path, and he told me stories of his travels, backpacking through Europe, sleeping on night trains. But something in the way he spoke, a vocabulary that was too precise, a knowledge of French wines that a 19-year-old wouldn't have, made me frown for a second. "And what do your parents say about that?" I asked innocently, and his smile hardened for a moment, his eyes darkening like passing clouds. "They don't get along with my adventures. They'd rather I stay home," he replied evasively, and changed the subject to an art festival we were going to attend together. The walk stretched on, the park becoming wilder toward the lake, with fewer people, and when the sun began to set, staining the water blood red, he suggested, "My car is nearby. I'll drive you home lest you get tired from walking." I accepted, the exhaustion of excitement mixing with a slight dizziness from the coffee, and got into his old blue sedan, the leather seats cracked and smelling of stale tobacco and something else, a metallic scent that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The engine roared to life with a guttural groan, and as he put in a cassette tape, indie music from the 90s, incongruous, I noticed the wrinkles on his knuckles, the age spots on the backs of his hands. "Alex, how old are you really?" I asked, the doubt crystallizing in my voice, but he just laughed, a laugh that now sounded hollow, and turned the wheel onto a side road, away from the city. 19, like I told you. Why do you doubt it?" His tone was playful, but his eyes in the rearview mirror were fixed, predatory, and panic began to grow in me like a frozen seed in my stomach. The road became an endless serpentine, flanked by dense forests where the trees closed in like skeletal fingers, and the sun sank completely, leaving the sky a sinister purple dotted with indifferent stars. I tried to keep the conversation light, but my questions, "Where are we going? My apartment is downtown," bounced off his growing silence, broken only by cryptic comments. "Patience, Anna. The best things are revealed in the dark." The car smelled more and more of that metallic stench, like rust and old sweat. And when I tried to take my phone out of my bag, the battery was dead. It must be the heat, I lied to myself, but the lump in my throat was growing. I asked again about his age, my voice now trembling, and he sighed, stopping the car in a secluded clearing, the engine cutting out with a final click that sounded like a sentence. "Well, since you insist," he said, turning to me with a smile that stretched his skin too tight over his bones, revealing deep wrinkles around his mouth, yellowed teeth I hadn't noticed before. I'm 52, sweetheart, but in my soul, 19 forever. The world tilted then, the air escaping my lungs in a choked gasp, horror hitting me like a punch to the solar plexus. Her eyes, those blue eyes I had admired in pixelated photos, were now wells of aged lust, surrounded by crow's feet like cracks in broken porcelain, and her entire face seemed to crumble in the moonlight. The sagging skin on his neck, the incipient baldness under his dyed hair, his ears enlarged by the years. "Put me down. This is some kind of sick joke," I yelled, struggling with the door, but it was locked, and he laughed again. That deep laugh that was now a guttural growl, reaching out to grab my wrist with a force that made me scream. His fingers were like iron hooks, the rough skin scraping my tender flesh, and he pulled me toward him, his hot, sour breath, stale beer, and tobacco invading my space. "This is no joke, Anna. It's destiny. I saw you on Facebook months ago, changing your photos, seeking attention, and I gave you what you wanted, a young, perfect boy. But now you'll see the real man." I tried to scratch his face, my nails grazing his cheek and leaving red marks that only excited him more, his eyes shining with a maniacal gleam. He slapped me then, a sharp blow that left my cheek burning, stars exploding in my vision, and as I sobbed, dazed, he pulled out a rag soaked in some chemical, ether perhaps, the sweet smell burning my nostrils, and pressed it against my mouth and nose. I struggled, kicking the dashboard, my legs tangled in the dress that now felt like a silk trap, but the world went blurry, the edges dissolving into black, and the last thing I saw was his smile wide and wicked, before darkness swallowed me whole, a void where my mind screamed soundlessly. I woke up with a ringing in my ears, my body numb as if it had been dipped in lead, and the first breath I took was of musty dampness and turned earth, a stench of forgotten basement that stuck to my tongue like a greasy film. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, illuminated by a bare bulb hanging from a frayed wire, and horror washed over me in waves. I was in an underground room, walls of bare concrete cracked by moisture, the floor of cold, compacted earth beneath my bare feet, my shoes, my socks, torn off at some point while I was unconscious. My hands were tied behind my back with rough duct tape that bit into my skin, and my floral dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing my white bra stained with dirt. I tried to move, but a short chain secured my ankles to a rusty ring embedded in the wall, limiting my range to a mere meter, like a caged animal. Panic coiled in my chest like a snake, squeezing until I couldn't breathe, and then I heard it. Heavy footsteps on the creaky wooden staircase, a slow, deliberate descent, like the ticking of a clock marking my end. The door at the end creaked open, making every hair on my body stand on end, and there he was. The man, not the boy, lit from behind like a nightmare silhouette, his figure bent by age, but imposing in its brutal reality. He wore a dirty, oil-stained t-shirt, sagging work pants that revealed a soft belly above his belt, and in his right hand, a bottle of water that he waved with a paternalistic smile. "Wake up, my girl. Welcome home." His voice was the same as in the audios, but now tinged with a viscous purr, and he approached with steps that echoed in my skull like hammer blows. I tried to scream, but a rag in my mouth muffled the sound to a pathetic whimper, tears streaming hot down my cheeks as he knelt down to my level, his face inches from mine, the wrinkles deep as plow furrows on his forehead, his foul breath enveloping me like toxic fog. "Shh, don't cry. Daddy's here. I brought you to a safe place, far away from those silly boys who don't deserve you." He reached out and brushed my cheek with the back of his fingers, a touch that was meant to be tender, but was invasive, his skin rough as sandpaper against my softness, and I pulled away violently, the chain clinking like cruel laughter. He laughed then, a guttural sound that reverberated off the walls, and pulled the rag from my mouth with a tug that scraped my lips. "Please let me go. "I'll call the police. My friends, this is kidnapping for God's sake." I sobbed, my voice breaking with panic, but he just shook his head like a disappointed father. "You don't understand, Anna. On Facebook, you were a lost girl, posting selfies for people to look at. I saw you. I understood you. I have 52 years of experience in the world. And you need guidance." He offered me the bottle, pressing it against my cracked lips, and warm water spilled down my chin as I drank in a desperate gulps, the momentary relief betrayed by the metallic taste that turned my stomach. He sat down next to me on the ground, his weight sinking into the earth, and took out his phone, the same one he used to chat with me, playing back our audio messages. My silly laughter, his voice feigning youth. "Listen to how happy you sounded. That's what I'll give you here, down here, far from the noise." The days melted into a blur of horror, time measured not by clocks, but by his visits, each one a step deeper into the abyss of my terror. He brought me food, plates of overcooked pasta with canned sauce, stale bread that I chewed with jaws that crunched audibly, and forced me to eat from his hand, his fat fingers pushing the food between my trembling lips, wiping the crumbs from my chin with a thumb that lingered too long, brushing the curve of my jaw as if measuring its softness. "You're so delicate, like a porcelain doll." "My daughters were never like that," he murmured, and the detail chilled me. Daughters. How many had there been before? I tried to reason with him for the first few hours, pleading between sobs. "I have a family I'm studying, please, just let me go and I'll forget everything." But his responses were delusional monologues about loneliness, about how women his age had abandoned him for immature boys like the ones you thought I was, and how I was his redemption, his eternal princess. The perversion revealed itself gradually, like a festering wound. On the second night, or was it the third, exhaustion clouding my mind, he returned with a worn cardboard box, his eyes shining with a feverish excitement that made me curl up against the wall, the chain pulling at my ankles in sharp pain. "I brought you a gift to make you feel at home," he said, opening the box with trembling hands, revealing a pink satin nightgown, the kind a 10-year-old girl would wear, with ruffles and bows that smelled of mothballs. "Put it on. Your dress is dirty." I shook my head, tears carving furrows in the grime on my face, but he leaned in, his heavy breath on the back of my neck as he cut the ties on my wrists with a rusty knife, the blade grazing my skin in an implied threat, and forced me to change, his eyes devouring every exposed inch as the dress fell to the floor in a treacherous whisper. The nightgown was rough against my skin, too small across the chest, squeezing my breasts in a humiliating display, and he sighed, a guttural sound of pleasure running a hand over my bare shoulder. "Perfect. Now you look like mine." That night, the abuse escalated. He tied my hands again, but this time with soft cotton ropes that bit less but tied deeper, and forced me to sit on his lap, his heavy body enveloping me like a shroud, the heat of his crotch pressing against my buttocks through the thin fabric. "Tell me about your fantasies, Anna. On Facebook, you pretended to be innocent, but I know there's fire underneath," he whispered, his hand sliding down my thigh, his thick fingers parting the fabric to brush the skin inside, a touch that made me convulse with revulsion, my stomach churning with bile. I cried, begged, kicked my chained feet, but he only laughed, his erection hardening against me like a hot rod, and kissed my neck with wet, slack lips, his stubble scraping like wire. "Don't cry, my girl. This is love. I'll teach you to enjoy it." His fingers explored higher, invading the intimacy of my underwear, a thick finger pressing against my dry, terrified sex, rubbing with a deliberate slowness that was meant to be seductive but was torture. Each movement a reminder of his power, of my helplessness. I screamed until my voice broke, the pain of the intrusion mingling with the psychological horror of feeling his weight, his smell, sour sweat, and cheap lotion, his hoarse voice murmuring, "So tight, so pure, for me alone." He didn't penetrate me that time. He contented himself with masturbating against my back, his hot semen splattering my nightgown in viscous spurts that cooled sticky against my skin while I dissociated, my mind floating to a white, empty place where I felt nothing, only the distant echo of my sobs. He left me there, curled up in the darkness, my body a map of bruises and humiliation, and in the stillness the terror sank deeper. It wasn't just the physical abuse, it was the erosion of my being, the way he reduced me to an object, a twisted fantasy born of his aging loneliness. The weeks, or were they months, I lost track when the sun became a memory, became a ritual of perversion that tore me apart layer by layer. He would come down every morning, his routine as a laborer. He worked in a metal factory, smelling of iron and grease, interrupted only by these visits, bringing trays of food that he would eat with me on the floor, forcing me to chew while he told me our story, how he had stalked me on Facebook, downloading photos to print and stick on the walls of his upstairs apartment, how he had faked his profile with photos stolen from a nephew who had died young, how he had planned every message to hook me like a fish on a hook. "You were so easy, Anna. Like here, a comment there, and you fell for it," he would say, laughing with breadcrumbs in his beard. And I would eat in silence, my appetite gone, but hunger, a whip that forced me to swallow, imagining each bite as poison that would kill me before he did. The abuse became systematic, a choreography of control that he directed with sadistic delight. He would untie me for baths, a rusty tub in a corner where the cold water stung like needles, and he would wash me personally, his soapy hands sliding over my body with obscene thoroughness, soaping my breasts until my nipples hurt from the friction, his thumbs circling in spirals that made me clench my teeth to keep from vomiting, spreading my legs for a thorough cleaning, a finger entering my vagina under the guise of hygiene, stirring slowly as he murmured, "So pink, so untouched for a real man." The horror of those moments was visceral, the water splashing my tears, his erection pressing against my hip as he hummed a twisted lullaby, and I closed my eyes, counting cracks in the ceiling so as not to break down, my mind a whirlwind of disgust and impotent rage. "Say you like it, Anna. Say thank you, Daddy," he demanded, and at first I resisted spitting out insults between sobs. "You're a monster, a disgusting old man," earning myself slaps that left my face swollen, my split lip bleeding into the pink water. But hunger, cold, and isolation broke me. One night, after hours without food, I whispered the words, my voice a broken thread, and he moaned with pleasure, rewarding me with a threadbare blanket that smelled of mold. The morbidity of his perversion deepened. He collected souvenirs, locks of my hair cut with blunt scissors while I slept. I would wake up with irregular patches on my head, touching them with trembling fingers, horrified by the loss of that last vanity. Toenails that he forced me to paint bright red before chewing them himself, licking the chip paint with a rough tongue that made me bristle with nausea. Once, he brought a broken mirror, placing it in front of me so I could see our love. Me, emaciated, my eyes sunken into purple circles, my dirty nightgown stuck to my skin, and him behind me, naked, his flabby, hairy body pressed against mine, his hands kneading my breasts like dough, pinching my nipples until they bled in tiny drops that he licked with delight. "Look at yourself, Anna. You're beautiful in pain. Your pussy gets wet when you cry. Did you know that?" He was lying, of course, but the doubt stuck in me like a thorn, my body betraying me with involuntary spasms that he interpreted as desire, masturbating on my belly while I screamed silently, his semen cooling like candle wax on my navel, marking me as his. The internal horror was the worst, a cancer that devoured my thoughts in the hours of solitude, when the light bulb flickered like an accusing eye, and rats scurried in the shadows, their tails brushing my chained feet in a touch that made me jump with muffled screams. I dreamed of my former life, laughter with friends on campus, the taste of vanilla ice cream in a sunny park, chatting with Alex, The fake Alex, who was now a cruel mockery in my memory. I would wake up sweating, my nightgown clinging to my skin in damp patches, and panic would overwhelm me. How much time had passed? Were they looking for me? Or had they already given up on me? Just another statistic in the news about missing girls. I tried to escape once, in a rare moment of carelessness, when he came up with his hands full of dishes, leaving the door ajar. I lunged forward, the chain stretching to its limit, my nails scratching the splintered wood, but all I could see was a dark hallway, stairs ascending toward a distant light, before he dragged me back by my hair. A handful torn out in the struggle, which he put in his pocket like a trophy. The punishment was brutal. He tied me outstretched on the floor, the ropes cutting off circulation to my limbs until they tingled in agony, and for the first time, he penetrated me. "This is for your ingratitude, girl," he growled, undressing with ritualistic slowness, his erect penis, veiny, curved, crowned with a swollen purple head, swaying like a threat. He spat on my hand for lubrication, a viscous glob that dripped down my thigh, and positioned himself between my forced open legs, the weight of his body crushing me against the cold earth, his knees digging into my hips. "Relax, or it will hurt more," he whispered, and pushed, a searing stretch that made me arch my back in a primal scream, the pain like fire radiating from my core to every nerve, tearing inexperienced tissue. I wasn't a virgin. I'd had a clumsy boyfriend in high school, but this was rape in its crudest form, his invading member pulsing inside me with clumsy but relentless thrusts, his soft belly slap against my pelvis, sweat dripping from his forehead onto my breasts in salty drops. He groaned like an animal, incoherent words coming out of his mouth, so tight, God, like a real girl. And I bit my lip until it bled, the metallic taste of blood on my tongue, the only anchor in the vertigo, my mind fragmenting into flashes. The date at the cafe, his fake smile, the forest closing in. He ejaculated with a roar, a hot stream flooding me, overflowing into a sticky puddle between my thighs, and withdrew with a wet pop, leaving a void that burned like acid. He left me there for hours, the semen drying into scabs, the pain a constant throb that made me curl up in a fetal position when he untied me, sobbing until my body surrendered to feverish sleep. In the nights that followed, the abuse became addictive for him, a cycle of penetrations that varied in cruelty. Sometimes slow, almost tender, whispering, "I love you," as he moved inside me, forcing me to look into his eyes. Those blue eyes now bloodshot. Other times furious, after a bad day at the factory, ramming me against the wall with the chain clanking like a metronome of horror, his hands around my neck squeezing until black spots danced in my vision, his orgasm synchronized with my partial suffocation. He forced me into more degrading acts, kneeling to take him in my mouth, his penis slapping my cheek before pushing between my lips. The salty, bitter taste filling my throat as he grabbed my hair in handfuls, guiding my head with jerks that drew muffled moans from me. "Swallow, Anna. It's your milk, your sustenance," he commanded, and I did, the vomit rising but swallowed back in a cycle of nausea, the thick semen coating my tongue like a profane communion. The horror in my mind was worse. I hated myself for surviving, for the body that responded involuntarily with treacherous lubrication under repeated assault, a biological mechanism he celebrated as reciprocal love, licking my fluids, mixed with his in a frenzy that made me feel dirty to the soul. Nightmares haunted me. I dreamed I was him, typing lies on Facebook to other girls, my age face smiling at me from the mirror, and I would wake up screaming, only to find his arms wrapped around me, his morning erection pressing against my butt in a morning of tenderness that ended in sodomy, his saliva as lubricant spat into my anus before the burning intrusion, the pain like a tear that made me bleed on the floor, red drops that he licked with cannibalistic delight. The break came during a visit when he brought a disposable phone. his face lit up by the screen with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Look, Anna, no one is looking for you anymore. 2 months. Your friends posted memes about you, the ghost girl, and your family. Well, they assumed you ran away with a boy." He showed me posts, photos of me with captions like, "We miss your smile, where are you?" But diluted in time, covered by jokes and other people's lives. Horror drowned me then, a black ocean where my existence dissolved, and in that void, something hardened inside me. Not anger, but a cold resignation, a calculation of survival. I began to pretend, to moan under his thrusts with feigned sounds of pleasure, to whisper more, "Daddy," while his fingers explored my orifices with improvised toys, a smooth shampoo bottle that he inserted into my vagina, twisting it to stretch you for me. And he took the bait, loosening the chains a little at a time, confident in his dominance. I planned in the shadows of my mind, counting his routines. He went upstairs at 7 to work, came down at 8 for intimate breakfast, slept upstairs after 11, snoring with beers. One night, after a session where he forced me to ride him, his hands on my hips guiding the movement, his penis sunk into me while he sucked my breasts until they were purple with hickeys. I faked a convulsive orgasm that left him ecstatic. My good girl. And he fell asleep beside me, his heavy arm around my waist, his stale breath in my hair. I waited for hours, my internal clock ticking in my temple, until his snoring deepened, and then, with numb fingers, I searched for the knife I had hidden in a crack in the concrete, stolen from a tray days before. The blade was blunt, but it was enough. I plunged it into his neck with a clumsy movement, blood spurting hot and sticky onto my hand, his eye opening in surprise before glazing over in death. I screamed then, a primal cry of release and trauma, cutting the ropes with tremors, blood mixing with my sweat in a scarlet bath. I staggered up the stairs, my torn nightgown hanging like rags, and ran out into a misty forest at dawn, running barefoot until my feet bled, collapsing on a highway where a truck driver found me, sobbing incoherently about the devil's basement. The police arrived later, photos of the scene, his stiff body, the walls covered with my pictures, and I repeated the story in fragments, my voice a hollow echo, but the horror did not end with his death. On therapy nights in the new apartment my parents rented, the ghost persists. I feel his breath on the back of my neck, his touch in my dreams, the ghost semen drying on my skin. Facebook is poison now, every notification a prick of paranoia, and when I look at my reflection, the short hair, the dead eyes, I see echoes of his perversion in me, the broken girl who survived but never healed. The world says I'm strong, a survivor, but in the quiet, I count the months in the basement like invisible scars, knowing that the shadow on the screen never completely goes away. I worked as a freelance editor in a tiny apartment in the city center, surrounded by piles of manuscripts about impossible loves and epic revenge. But my own story was a gray blur, a recent divorce that had left me with invisible scars, friends scattered around the world, and a loneliness that seeped into my bones like moisture from cracked walls. It was on Tinder that he appeared. Marcos, 35 years old according to his profile, with a smiling photo showing him in a park, his arm around an 8-year-old girl who was laughing with her head thrown back, blonde locks escaping from a messy ponytail. Single father looking for company for walks and laughs, his bio said, and something about that image. The feigned tenderness, the girl as the perfect accessory, appealed to me, perhaps because I myself longed for that domestic normality I had never had. I liked his post, and he responded instantly with a playful message. If you like vanilla ice cream with chocolate chips, we already have something in common. Coffee on Saturday? His profile picture was impeccable. Warm brown eyes, square jaw shadowed by stubble, plaid shirt suggesting a practical man who spends his weekends in parks. We talked for days, his text fluid and attentive, asking about my favorite books. Have you read The Great Gatsby? That tragedy breaks me every time. And sharing anecdotes about his daughter, Sophia, a mischievous but sweet girl who loved cartoons and stray cats. He told me that his wife had died in an accident 3 years ago, leaving a void he was trying to fill with fatherly routines. And I, with my empathy as an editor of tragedies, was moved, imagining a vulnerable man beneath that strong facade. Saturday arrived with warm sunshine filtering through the yellow leaves in the Plaza Cafe. And there he was, punctual, getting up from the table with a smile that genuinely crinkled his eyes, or so I thought. He kissed me on the cheek with a light touch that left a trace of citrus aftershave, and we sat under a threadbare awning, the aroma of espresso and croissants enveloping us like a promise. We talked about everything: how divorce had made me question my choices, his job as a mechanic in a suburban workshop, dirty hands but a clean soul, and Sophia, whom he described with an affection that melted me. She's my whole world. Sometimes she wears me out, but her laugh, God, her laugh is what keeps me going. He ordered a double cappuccino, his large calloused fingers wrapping around the cup with a delicacy that contrasted with the grease stains under his fingernails. And he touched the back of my hand once, a fleeting gesture that sent a tingle up my arm. The date extended into a walk around the square, his steps synchronizing with mine, and when he left me at the door of my building with a "Call me soon, Elena. You've made my day brighter," I thought I had found a refuge, a real man in a sea of fake profiles. I didn't see the cracks then, the shadows hidden beneath his smile. The following weeks were a whirlwind of cautious euphoria, dates piling up like pages in a draft, dinners in modest restaurants where he always paid with crumpled bills from his worn wallet, nighttime walks by the river where the black water reflected the city lights like broken promises, and good morning messages that woke me up with a warmth I had forgotten. Marcos was attentive, almost obsessively so. He remembered my peanut allergy, sent me photos of sunsets with poetic captions, like your eyes when you laugh. And little by little, he invited me into his world. The first time I met Sophia was on a Sunday in mid-November, at her house in the suburbs, a modest one-story bungalow with an unkempt garden and a garage full of rusty tools that smelled of metal and oil. "It's a bit chaotic, but it's our home," she said, opening the door with a key that jingled like a warning. And the interior struck me with a contrast. The immaculate living room, precisely assembled IKEA furniture, toys neatly arranged on shelves, but a stale air, as if the windows were never opened. Sophia emerged from the kitchen with timid steps, a petite girl with large blue eyes that contrasted with her dull blonde hair, pulled back in a tight braid that tugged at her scalp. She wore a faded pink dress, too big for her thin frame, and stood frozen in the doorway, staring at me with an intensity that was not childish curiosity, but something deeper, an animalistic scrutiny of survival. "Hi, Sophia. I'm Elena," I said, kneeling down to her level, extending my hand with a smile that was meant to be welcoming, but she took a step back, her eyes dropping to the floor as if eye contact were a crime. Marcos laughed, a laugh that sounded forced in the silence of the house, and took her by the shoulder, with a pat that was meant to be playful but made the girl cringe. She's shy with strangers, but you'll see. She's a whirlwind when she loosens up. We made cookies together in the kitchen, me stirring the dough with nervous hands, Marcos telling silly jokes about elephants and refrigerators that Sophia didn't laugh at. She just smiled, a mechanical curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. And I noticed the little things. Yellowish bruises on her forearm, explained away as she fell off her bike. The way she sat stiffly at the table, her hands in her lap like a porcelain doll, and the way Marcos corrected her in a low, almost whispered tone. "Sophia, eat slowly. Don't be an animal." That night, as I said goodbye with a kiss at the door, Marcos pressing his lips against mine with an urgency that took my breath away, Sophia looked at me from the hallway, her eyes pleading for a second before Marcos closed the door. And in my car, on the way home, a chill ran down my neck, a vague premonition like a shadow on the periphery of my vision. I attributed it all to my post-divorce paranoia, to my tendency to read tragedies into silences, but sleep that night was restless, dreaming of a little girl screaming in a closed house, her voice drowned out by adult laughter. The relationship with Marcos deepened like a widening crack, inviting me to stay over on weekends, turning his bungalow into a second home where I tried to fit in like a forced piece in a broken puzzle. He was a passionate lover, his calloused hands exploring my body with a mixture of tenderness and possession that made me feel desired, alive. Nights in his creaky bed where he kissed my neck until it left red marks, whispering, "You're mine now, Elena, all mine." And I would lose myself in the warmth of his skin, ignoring the faint smell of stale sweat emanating from the sheets, as if they weren't washed often enough. Sophia became a constant presence, a silent shadow lurking at the edges of our routines. Breakfasts, where I tried to strike up a conversation. "What do you like to draw, Sophia?" And she responded in monosyllables, her eyes fixed on her plate, her hands trembling slightly as she held her spoon. Marcos pampered her in public, buying her ice cream in the park or combing her hair with a patience that bordered on the theatrical. But at home, I noticed the changes. The way he sent her to her room with a "go play, princess" that sounded like an order. The click of the lock on her door that he explained was so she doesn't wake up at night, and the muffled cries that filtered through the thin walls at midnight, followed by sharp slaps and a "shut up, Sophia, or it will be worse." At first, I dismissed it as strict parental discipline. Kids test boundaries. But the horror began to seep into my nights. Dreams where I saw bruises blooming on the girl's pale skin like poisonous flowers. And I would wake up sweating, my heart pounding with an irrational panic that made me hug my pillow like a shield. One December morning, while Marcos was in the shower, steam escaping through the half-open door, Sophia approached me in the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the cold linoleum. "Elena," she whispered, her voice a broken thread, so low I had to lean in to hear her, and her eyes, those blue eyes sunk into dark circles, locked onto mine with a desperation that froze my blood. "I'm not his daughter. He brought me here. Please save me." The words were a punch to my stomach, the world tilting in a dizzy spin, and before I could process them, Marcos came out wrapped in a towel, his smile freezing at the proximity. "Sophia, what did I tell you about bothering Elena?" he growled, his voice low but steely, and grabbed her arm with a force that made the girl squirm, a whimper escaping her lips. "We were just playing," I stammered, panic climbing my throat. But he let her go with a forced laugh, ruffling her hair with a hand that now looked like a claw. "She's a gossip, this one. Go to your room now." Sophia fled, her little feet skidding across the floor, and Marcos kissed me, his invasive tongue erasing the moment, but the poison had already been injected. That night, alone in my apartment, I Googled missing children with trembling hands, and a blurry photo of Sophia, or an identical girl, appeared in an article from 2 years ago. 8-year-old girl disappears on way to school. Horror washed over me like a black tide, nausea churning my stomach as I imagined Marcos's hands tearing her from her normal life. And in bed, curled up under the covers, I cried silently. The weight of my complicity. I had slept at his house, kissed the monster, crushing me like a slab. The discovery unfolded like a festering wound, slow and putrid, forcing me to feign normality while terror gnawed at me from within. I returned to his house on weekends, my smile a fragile mask that cracked in moments of solitude, watching Sophia with obsessive attention. The tremors in her hands when Marcos entered the room, the way she wet the bed, explained away as little girl accidents, leaving wet sheets that he changed with a sigh of exasperation, and the bruises that appeared like mushrooms after rain. A purple hematoma on her inner thigh that I saw one day when I changed her clothes for a quick bath. her skin marked with fingerprints that were not from accidental falls. Marcos was a master of daytime charm, taking us to parks where he played soccer with her, her laughter ringing like a false echo. But the nights revealed the beast. I heard the blows through the wall, slaps that echoed like muffled gunshots, followed by childish sobs that turned into muffled moans. And once, unable to contain myself, I got up in the dark, the hallway lit by a pale moon filtering through the dirty window. Sophia's door was ajar, an oversight perhaps, and from the doorway, in the shadows, I saw him. Marcos leaning over the bed, his massive silhouette covering the girl's small body, whispering in a hoarse voice, "Shh, princess. This is our secret, or I'll hurt your new mommy." Horror paralyzed me, a scream frozen in my throat as I processed the scene. His hand under the sheet, moving in a deliberate rhythm that made the mattress creak. Sophia, motionless as a corpse, her eyes open and fixed on the ceiling, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. It was abuse in its most perverse form, not just beatings, but systematic, ritualistic rape, where Marcos touched her with obscene slowness, his fingers exploring the stolen innocence of her childish body, murmuring promises of fatherly love that were pure poison. I staggered away, vomit rising in my mouth in an acidic arc that I swallowed in the bathroom, and in the bed next to him, who was snoring peacefully minutes later, disgust washed over me like a fever. I'd kissed those lips that kissed the girl, slept in sheets that hid horrors, and my mind filled with images. Marcos penetrating her with thick fingers, his erect penis rubbing against her skin in a games that broke her, sticky semen staining her nightgown like a mark of ownership. The psychological terror was a labyrinth. I hated myself for not having acted sooner, for having ignored the signs, the toys in the garage that were ropes and gags camouflaged as fishing equipment. And in my dreams, I was the girl, chained to the bed, while Marcos whispered to me, "You're my daughter now, Elena, and I'll make you enjoy it." Marcos's perversion was revealed in layers, like a rotten onion that suffocated me with each peeled skin. One night in January, after a dinner where Sophia barely touched her plate, "Eat, or there will be no dessert." He sent her to bed early, and as I washed the dishes, I heard the first blow, a dull thud from her room, followed by a sharp cry that cut off like a cable. My heart raced in a gallop of panic, the water running in the sink masking my gasps. And when I entered the hallway, the door was closed, but voices filtered through. "Liar, you told her things about me." Marcos roared, his voice a low thunder, and then the sound of flesh against flesh, rhythmic slaps that made my stomach contract in spasms. Sophia sobbed, "I'm sorry, Dad. I won't do it again." And he responded with an animalistic growl. "Yes, you will, because if you don't, I'll kill her, do you understand? I'll kill your Elena slowly." Horror pinned me to the floor, hot tears streaming as I imagined the scene. Marcos standing over her, his fist clenching in the air before striking her slender side, bruises blooming like ripe blackberries on her pale skin. And then, worst of all, the silence that followed, broken by wet whispers, the mattress creaking in an ominous rhythm. It was multifaceted abuse, violent and sexual. He beat her for bad behavior, confessing my question about her origins perhaps, punches to the abdomen that left her doubled over, coughing up bile, and then he would comfort her with invasive touches, his large hands opening her childish legs, fingers sinking into her dry, terrified vagina, rubbing with a slowness that was meant to be loving but was pure torture, whispering, "This teaches you obedience, my dirty girl." Sophia didn't scream then, she shut down, her body an empty shell, while he masturbated over her, hot semen splattering her belly in spurts that he then licked up, his rough tongue tracing patterns on her skin like a pagan ritual. I, hidden in the shadows, trembled with visceral terror, cold sweat soaking my blouse, imagining the girl's pain, the searing stretch, the nausea of the metallic taste in her mouth when he forced her to suck his stained fingers. And my own guilt devoured me. How had I been so blind? How had I laughed with him that very afternoon, ignoring the tremor in Sophia's hands as she passed him the salt. That night, I pretended to sleep, his heavy body pressed against mine, his morning erection a nauseating reminder of his insatiable lust. And in the shower, I scrubbed my skin until it was red, trying to wash away the ghost of his touch. But the horror had taken hold of me like a parasite, whispering in my ears during the day. If you leave, he'll kill her. If you stay, you'll be an accomplice. The descent was a spiral of paranoia and impossible decisions, my mind a minefield where every step threatened to explode. I began to secretly document blurry photos of bruises on Sophia's arms, taken in the bathroom while Marcos slept, my phone trembling in my hand. Notes in my diary about the sounds of the night. 2:17 a.m. Slap, crying, 20 minutes of silence, low moans. Sophia sought me out in stolen moments, whispering in the kitchen as she peeled vegetables with a knife too big for her hands. Everything hurts, Elena. He does horrible things to me. He says if I tell, he'll bury me in the garden with the cats. Her words were daggers, the horror in her childish voice, an echo of my own childhood. An absent father, but not a monstrous one. And I hugged her quickly, my heart breaking into pieces, silently promising, I'll get you out of here. But fear paralyzed me. Marcos sensed my distance, his kisses becoming more insistent, his hands squeezing my waist with a force that left marks. And one night, after mechanical sex where he penetrated me with brutal thrusts, growling, "Give me more, Elena, like she can't," disgust overwhelmed me, his semen inside me like contamination, and I ran to the bathroom to vomit, the mirror reflecting my gaunt face, eyes sunken into dark circles that were not just from insomnia but from a chronic terror that robbed me of sleep. I imagined his violence against me, fists clenching my hair, dragging me to the basement that smelled of damp earth. I had seen the trapdoor in the garage, covered with tarps. And there, chained next to Sophia, his perversion spreading to us like a virus, forcing us to touch each other for his delight, his laughter echoing as he taught us lessons, his swollen penis alternating between our bodies, the shared pain a bond of horror. Sophia's abuse escalated in my absent mind. I heard it at midnight, the blows now accompanied by insults. "Little whore, this is for talking." And once, peeking through the crack, I saw the culmination. Marcos naked, his flaccid body covered in sweat, kneeling on the bed with Sophia face down, her childish buttocks exposed, and him spitting on her anus before pushing a thick finger inside, the girl's scream cut off by his hand over her mouth, muffling the sound as he moved inside her with perverse concentration. His eyes closed in ecstasy, murmuring, "So tight, my perfect daughter." Semen spurted out afterwards, covering her back in white rivulets that he spread with his hand, forcing her to lick his fingers in a degrading communion, and Sophia obeyed, her face expressionless, her eyes dead as wells. I withdrew, sobbing silently, vomit burning my throat, and in bed, next to the sleeping monster, panic consumed me. How much longer could I pretend? How long before he smelled my betrayal and destroyed us both? Salvation came in a burst of adrenaline and desperate calculation, a plan forged in sleepless nights where I mapped out mental escape routes. I called the police anonymously one afternoon while Marcos was at the workshop, my voice disguised on a disposable phone bought at a distant pharmacy. "There's a kidnapped girl in the bungalow at 47 Olmo Street. Bruises, sexual abuse, check the basement." But I knew I needed proof, something irrefutable, so that night while he slept drunk after beers, his stale breath a miasma in the room, I sneaked into his study, a room I avoided with excuses, and found hell. Drawers full of Polaroid photos of Sophia naked, forced poses with fresh bruises, diagrams scribbled in a diary where he detailed sessions. Day 456, blows to thighs for sensitivity, digital intrusion 3 centimeters, minimal response, ejaculation on face for marking. The horror made me dizzy, the images burning my retinas. Sophia blindfolded, ropes tying her wrist to the headboard, semen drying on her cheek like salty tears. And I copied pages with trembling hands, the flash of my phone a risk that made my skin crawl. The next day, with the envelope of evidence in my bag, I took Sophia to the park alone. "Let's go find flowers for Marcos," I lied. And in a public restroom, away from prying eyes, I whispered to her, "Today you're leaving. Run to the police officer on the corner and say kidnapping." Tears welled up in her eyes, a quick hug that broke my heart. Her thin body trembling against mine, smelling of cheap soap and fear. And I watched her run, her skinny legs devouring the sidewalk, while I returned to the bungalow with my heart in my throat. Marcos arrived furious that afternoon, the police bursting in minutes later with Sophia safe in a patrol car, her confessions spilling out in sobs. "He kidnapped me 2 years ago. He hits me. He touches me." He looked at me then, his brown eyes turning into wells of pure hatred. You traitorous bitch." And he lunged, his fist closing on my blouse before the officers subdued him, handcuffs clicking like a final verdict. At the police station, as I gave my statement in a broken voice, post-traumatic horror overwhelmed me. Flashes of him beating Sophia, his invading penis, my own complicity in shared kisses, and I vomited in the bathroom, the world spinning in eternal nausea. Marcos went to prison that same week, sentenced to 20 years for kidnapping, child abuse, and extreme violence. The photos, the diary, Sophia's medical exams confirming tears and trauma, but victory was ashes in my mouth. Sophia was relocated with a distant aunt, and I visited her once in her new home, her tentative smile a fragile balm, but in my nights, the terror persists. Dreams, where Marcos appears, his silhouette in the window of my new apartment, whispering, "I'll find you, Elena, and I'll make you my daughter." My skin still tingles with the ghost of his touch, my mind an archive of horrors that cannot be erased, and in the stillness, I count the shadows, knowing that I saved a child, but lost pieces of myself in that cursed bungalow, echoes of slaps and moans whispering in the darkness forever. My name is Carla. I'm 26 years old, and in the spring of 2023, my life was an endless cycle of double shifts at the mall cafe, where the smell of burnt coffee and reheated croissants clung to my skin like a second layer of sweat, and lonely nights in my rented apartment, a hovel with walls so thin that I could hear my neighbors fucking or arguing as if they were my own inner demons. The divorce had left me in pieces. An ex-husband who preferred gambling to my bed, and me, with my heart tied in knots of debt and doubt. So when my friend Marta convinced me to try Bumble, I did so, with that mixture of cynicism and hope that only single women know. "Just chat, Carla. You've got nothing to lose." My profile was ridiculously honest. A photo on the beach from 2 summers ago, with my hair tousled by the wind and a smile that hid the dark circles under my eyes. A bio that said, "Lover of books, red wine, and deep conversations. No drama." He appeared the next day. Javier, 30 years old, engineer at a construction firm, with a profile photo showing him on a construction site, helmet in hand, blue shirt rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, and a crooked smile that promised confidence. "If red wine is your vice, let me buy you one that will blow your mind. Friday, 8 p.m. at El Rincón del Rio." His message was direct, without cheesy emojis, and something about his candor hooked me. After months of guys sending dick pics or poems stolen from Instagram, Javier seemed real. We chatted online during the week, he telling stories about construction sites where steel yielded like soft flesh, me laughing at his dry jokes about incompetent bosses. "You're refreshing, Carla. Most people are just looking for selfies," he wrote one night, and I, curled up on my saggy couch with a glass of cheap Merlot, replied with, "Same here. Let's talk in person." Friday arrived with a fine rain that dampened the streets, turning the asphalt into slippery mirrors, where neon lights reflected like broken veins. I put on a tight black dress, the one that made me feel effortlessly sexy, heels that clacked against the wet pavement, and a red coat that gave me an air of femme fatale that I didn't feel. El Rincón del Rio was an intimate bar by the canal with varnished wooden tables and flickering candles that smelled of melted wax and forbidden cigarette smoke. I arrived on time, my heart pounding in my temples like a war drum, and there he was, standing by the bar, taller than I had imagined, at least 6 feet tall, wearing dark jeans and a gray t-shirt that hugged his broad chest, his green eyes fixed on the door as if he had been waiting for me his whole life. "Carla," he said, his deep husky voice emphasizing my name like a caress, and he kissed me on the cheek, his 3-day beard scraping my skin, leaving a trail of spicy cologne that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. We sat at a secluded table, the murmur of the bar, muffled laughter, clinking glasses, enveloping us like a fragile bubble, and he ordered a bottle of Argentine Malbec without asking, his long, strong fingers pouring the wine with a precision that spoke of control. We toasted, the glass clinking with a crystalline tink, and the conversation flowed like the river outside. Books. He loved Bukowski for his rawness. I loved Atwood for her feminine fury. Exes who had fucked up our souls and postponed dreams. He wanted to travel to Patagonia. I wanted to write a blog that was nothing more than a dusty notebook. He touched my hand once, his thumb tracing a slow circle on my back, and the warmth of his skin made me blush, a treacherous pulse beating between my thighs. "You're more interesting than your photo promised," he murmured, his eyes devouring my cleavage with an intensity that was not lewd, but hungry. And I laughed, attributing it to the wine that was already rising to my head in a warm haze. The night stretched on, rain lashing the windows like impatient fingers, and when the bar closed, he proposed, "My car is nearby. I'll drive you home. Or, if you want, we can continue our conversation at my place. I have a reserve Malbec that Bukowski would approve of." I hesitated for a second, instinct whispering caution. Always damn instinct. But the wine in his smile won out, and I nodded, the click of my heels following him to the parking lot, where his black SUV waited like a sleeping beast. The drive was a blur of blurry streetlights and his hand on my knee, a casual touch that turned possessive when he turned onto a side road, the trees closing in like silent guardians on either side. "My place is a bit far, but it's worth it," he said, his voice a low purr that vibrated in the confined space of the car, the scent of old leather, and his cologne mingling with mine of vanilla and rain. I tried to keep the conversation light. "What music do you listen to at work?" But his answers became short, his eyes fixed on the road with a tension I hadn't noticed before, his jaw clenched as if chewing on unspoken words. Panic started as a tingling sensation in the back of my neck when my phone's GPS beeped, "Off route," but he silenced it with a laugh. "Traffic, baby. Relax." His hand moved up my thigh, his fingers sinking into the flesh beneath my dress, and I tensed, pushing it away with a nervous joke. "Hey, slow down, cowboy." But his grip tightened, a squeeze that made me gasp, the pain radiating like lightning. "Don't tell me what to do, Carla. You've had enough to drink to be a good girl." The words were a bucket of cold water, the world tilting in a dizzy spin, and when I tried to open the door at a traffic light, the child lock clicked, his laughter now a guttural growl. "Let's have some fun, bitch. Like in your Atwood books, right? The man who takes what he wants." Terror washed over me then, a lump in my throat choking my scream, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird, and he sped up, the truck roaring down a gravel road that ended at an isolated cabin, a rotting wooden frame surrounded by pine trees that whispered in the wind like accomplices. He dragged me out of the car by my hair, my heels sinking into the mud, my dress tearing at my thigh with a sound that was a sob, and when I screamed, "Let me go, damn it!" he slapped me with the back of his hand, a sharp blow that left my cheek burning, stars exploding in my blurred vision. "Shut up, or I'll break your mouth before I use it." His voice was tempered steel, his green eyes now wells of cold rage, and he pushed me into the cabin, the door slamming shut with a thud that sealed my fate. the interior a chaos of empty bottles and rusty tools that smelled of rust and despair. The cabin was a claustrophobic hell, a single room with an unmade bed in the corner, sheets stained with something dark I didn't want to identify, a makeshift kitchen with a dirty stove and a wobbly table where a hunting knife with a nicked edge lay. He threw me against the wall, my back hitting the splintered wood that scraped my skin through my dress, and before I could recover, his fist sank into my stomach, a dull thud that expelled the air from my lungs in a choked wheeze, the pain blooming like a black flower in my abdomen. I fell to my knees, vomiting bile and wine onto the cracked linoleum floor, tears streaming hot as I gasped for air, the world a whirlwind of nausea and primal fear. Please. Javier, no. I begged, my voice a broken thread, but he laughed, a guttural sound that reverberated in my skull like a hammer, and grabbed my hair, pulling my head back to expose my throat, his hot, sour breath, beer, and rage brushing my ear. Javier was the bait, Carla. I'm Victor. And your dinner. Horror pierced me then, a visceral understanding that this wasn't a fit of jealousy or alcohol. It was premeditated, a ritual of violence he had rehearsed in his twisted mind. He dragged me to the bed by my hair, handfuls of it torn out and floating like bloody feathers, and pinned me down with his weight, his knees digging into my thighs to spread them wide, my dress riding up in shreds to my waist. Scream all you want. No one hears you here, only the pines, and they owe me favors. His hands were hooks, tearing the lace of my underwear with a tug that made me scream, the cold air licking my exposed sex like a cruel tongue. And when his fingers sank into me, thick, calloused, invading without lubrication, the pain was a burning fire, a stretching that tore sensitive tissue, tears streaming down my face as I struggled, my nails scratching his forearm in red grooves that only excited him more. Yes, fight, bitch. It makes me hard. His penis was already erect, pressing against my entrance with brutal insistence, and he thrust, a ram that split me in two, the burning radiating from my center to my fingertips, every vein of his member, rubbing against my inner walls like raw sandpaper. I moaned, not in pleasure, but in pure agony, my body betraying me with involuntary spasms that he interpreted as surrender, his hips slamming into mine in a savage rhythm, slap, 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 echoing like gunshots in the closed room. So tight, as if you were a virgin to me, he growled, his breath on my neck, biting my skin until it bled, warm blood dripping down my collarbone as he licked the wound with a rough, salty tongue, the metallic taste mixing with his sweat that dripped onto my chest. It didn't last long, minutes that felt like an eternity, his body tensing in a spasm, ejaculating inside me with an animalistic roar, hot spurts overflowing into a sticky pool between my thighs, the semen cooling like wax of shame. He withdrew with a wet pop, leaving a void that throbbed in agony, and stood up panting, his silhouette silhouetted against the dim light of a hanging lamp that flickered like an accusing eye. But the horror didn't end with his orgasm. It was just the appetizer. He left me there, curled up on the bed, with my legs trembling, my dress in tatters around my waist, semen dripping down my skin in rivulets that made me feel dirty to my soul. And as I tried to sit up, my hands slipping on the mattress soaked with sweat and fluids. He returned from the kitchen with the beer in one hand and the hunting knife in the other, the blade glinting in the light like a promise of more pain. Don't think we're done, Carla. The night is young. His voice was calm now, almost conversational, as if we were chatting about the weather after a casual fuck, and he sat on the edge of the bed, taking a long drink that left foam on his mustache, his eyes fixed on me with clinical curiosity. Get naked. Everything. I shivered, the cold of the cabin seeping into my bones like an icy finger, but the edge of the knife grazing my thigh, cold, relentless, forced me to obey, my clumsy fingers unbuttoning what was left of the dress, letting it fall in a crumpled heap, the bra following, my breasts exposed to the air that treacherously hardened my nipples. Naked, vulnerable, I covered myself with my arms, but he pushed my hands away with a backhand that left my cheek swollen, my lips split and bleeding in drops that fell onto my breasts. Hands up. I want to see you completely. The psychological abuse was a slow poison. He forced me to stand up, turn around like a puppet, his gaze devouring every curve. The arch of my back, the curve of my hips, the dark triangle of pubic hair stained with his seed. And he commented like a sadistic art critic. Nice tits, firm but not silicone. The pussy, pink, but I already dirtied it. Tomorrow we'll shave it. Hot tears rolled down my face, disgust churning my stomach. But he didn't stop. He pushed me to my knees in front of him, the knife at my neck pressing hard enough to make a drop of blood bead on my skin, and unbuttoned his jeans, his flaccid penis, emerging like a sleepy snake. Suck it. Make it hard again, or I'll cut your hair and use it to clean myself. Horror choked me, bile rising in my throat as I opened my mouth, the salty, bitter taste of his skin filling my tongue, my lips stretching around his growing thickness, the swollen head pushing against my palate in thrusts that made me gag. I coughed, saliva and tears mixing into a river that dripped down my chin, but he grabbed my hair in handfuls, guiding my head with brutal jerks that wrenched muffled moans from me, the knife a constant reminder at the back of my neck. Deeper, bitch. Swallow like you love it. My mind fragmented then, dissociating into a white place where I didn't feel the rub of his glands against my throat, the smell of stale sex invading my nostrils, only the distant echo of my own humiliation, my body moving by inertia while he moaned, his ejaculation spurting in thick jets that I swallowed out of instinct for survival, the semen burning my throat like acid, an aftertaste that would haunt me in nightmares. He withdrew, wiping himself on my hair with a laugh, and threw a threadbare blanket at me. Sleep. Tomorrow we'll play some more. Morning came with a pale sun filtering through the cracks in the dirty blinds, illuminating the chaos of the cabin like a spotlight on a crime scene, and I woke up with my body a map of pain, purple bruises on my thighs where his fingers had dug in, my vagina swollen and lacerated, throbbing with every movement, my split lip crunching when I tried to lick it, and a bruise on my cheek that beat like a second heart. Victor, no longer Javier, the name a discarded disguise, was snoring on the floor, an empty bottle beside him, and for a second panic paralyzed me. Run away. The door was just a few feet away, but my legs were shaking like jelly, the knife on the table a silent sentry. I crawled to the bathroom, a cubicle with a dirty toilet and a fogged-up mirror that reflected my gaunt face, red swollen eyes, hair tangled with sticky strands of his dried semen, and looked at myself, the inner horror and abyss that sucked me in. Who was this broken woman? Her skin marked like cattle. I washed my body with cold water that stung like salt on wounds, rubbing between my legs until I bled, the cheap soap leaving a pink foamy trail that swirled down the drain like my lost innocence, and I sobbed silently, stifling my hiccups against my palm so as not to wake him. And the abuse wasn't just physical. It was an erosion of the soul, each touch a nail in my self-esteem. His words, whore, toy, mine to break, echoing in my head like an evil mantra that made me doubt my worth, why I had gotten into his car, whether I had provoked him with my dress or my laughter. I came out of the bathroom wrapped in a threadbare towel that smelled of mold, and he was already awake, sitting at the table with a lazy smile, a cigarette hanging from his lips. Good morning, sleepyhead. Breakfast. He served scrambled eggs from a greasy pan, the smoke rising in spirals that turned my stomach, and forced me to eat naked, the towel falling to the floor with a treacherous whisper, his eyes devouring my nakedness as I chewed. Eat, or I won't give you water, and today we're going to play something new. Terror coiled in my belly like a snake, but I obeyed, the fork trembling in my hand, the mushy egg sticking to my tongue like guilt. After breakfast, the game began. He tied my hands to the headboard with extension cords that bit into my skin, the knots tightened by his expert fingers. I learned how to tie knots well on the job, and left me exposed, my legs spread by his knees, the knife tracing invisible lines on my skin without cutting, the cold blade kissing my nipple, my belly button, the crease of my groin. "Tell me you love me, Carla. Say it or I'll cut." The words came out in a broken whisper. "I love you, Victor." And he laughed, the sound a knife in my heart, before penetrating me again, this time with the knife handle first, cold, relentless, stretching me in a pain that made me arch my back in screams, followed by his penis, alternating in a symphony of invasion that left me gasping, my body a battlefield where forced pleasure mingled with disgust in nauseating waves. He ejaculated on my chest, hot semen splattering like war paint, and spread it with the blade of the knife. A shallow cut on my thigh marking his territory, blood spurting in beads that he licked with delight, his rough tongue sealing the wound like a profane kiss. "Now you're truly mine." Marked. The days melted into a blur of cyclical violence, time measured not by clocks, but by bruises ripening from red to purple to yellow, and my mind, a labyrinth of dissociation where I survived by floating above my broken body. Victor would go out for supplies, beer, canned food, condoms he didn't use because I preferred to feel you raw. And in his absence, I would explore the cabin like a prisoner in her cell, finding horrors that made my blood run cold. An album hidden under the mattress with photos of other women. Bruised faces, bodies tied up in poses similar to mine, notes on the back like "Carla 2 lasted 5 days, broke easily," and a diary scribbled in his angular handwriting. The first one was a mistake. She screamed too much. I learned to hit the stomach first. It cuts off the air. The current one has pretty eyes when she cries. The discovery was a punch in the gut. I wasn't the first, just the latest in a chain of abuses he collected like trophies. His perversion, a hobby refined in isolation, the cabin an altar to his dominance. I vomited into the rusty bucket in the bathroom, the acid burning my throat as I imagined those women, their pleas, their bodies discarded in the woods like trash, and panic consumed me. Would I be the next photo, my face frozen in agony for his private gallery? When I returned, the cycle resumed, beatings for defiant looks, punches to the ribs that left me coughing up blood, the pain a constant throb that made me curl up in a fetal position, followed by forced sex that varied in cruelty. He sodomized me against the table, his saliva as lubricant spat into my anus before the burning intrusion, the tearing like liquid fire that made me bleed in spurts that he licked away, laughing. Or he forced me to masturbate him with my hands tied, my fingers slipping on his sweaty foreskin until he ejaculated on my face, the semen temporarily blinding me, dripping into my eyes like salty tears. The psychological horror was the worst. He would tell me stories about his exotics, describing how one peed herself in fear during the act, how another begged for her life until he broke her jaw with a punch, and I would listen, naked on the floor, the knife in his lap like a pendulum of death, my mind screaming escape but my body paralyzed by trauma. One night, after whipping me with his belt, the leather biting into my back in bloody gashes that burned like embers, he forced me to lick his muddy boots, my tongue scraping against the cracked leather while he smoked, the smoke enveloping me like a shroud, and whispered, "You're addicted now, Carla. Tomorrow I'll fuck you in the ass until you beg for more." Disgust overwhelmed me, and I vomited all over his boots, earning me a kick in the side that cracked like dry wood, the pain a fire that left me sobbing for hours, my body a canvas of bruises throbbing in unison with my terror. The break came on the 5th day. Or was it the 7th? Time a murky river, when Victor, drunk on cheap whiskey that smelled like turpentine, tied me down on the bed with ropes that cut off the circulation in my wrists until they tingled in black agony, and brought the knife, tracing lines on my abdomen without cutting at first, the blade kissing my skin in a deadly dance that made me hyperventilate. "Today we're playing truth or dare," he said, his foul breath brushing my ear, and asked for my secrets. "How many have you fucked? Do you like pain?" Each wrong answer a superficial cut. A red line on my thigh for lying about your ex, another on my chest for not moaning enough. Blood spurted in beads that he collected with his finger, smearing my mouth with my own metallic essence, forcing me to swallow as he penetrated my reopened vaginal wound. The pain, a symphony of fire that made me convulse, tears and blood mixing in a river on my pillow. "Scream my name, Carla. Say I'm your god." The words came out in a babble. Victor. God. And he ejaculated inside me with a roar, the semen mixing with the blood in a viscous clot that dripped onto the floor. He left me there, slowly bleeding out, the world a pulse of agony, and in dissociation, I floated. The knife forgotten on the table, the rope slack from his drunkenness. I waited for hours, his guttural snoring the only sound, and with teeth and nails, I gnawed at the rope until it gave way, my free hands shaking like leaves. I crawled, my body a mass of pain, grabbing the knife, heavy, slippery in my bloody palm, and positioned myself over him, the blade against his exposed throat, the flaccid skin vibrating with his pulse. "Move, and I'll kill you," I whispered, my voice a broken hiss. And when he opened his eyes, surprise, then fury, I plunged the blade in, a hot spray spattering my face like scarlet rain, his choked gurgle turning to a rattle as he thrashed, his hands clawing my arm in burning furrows. I stabbed again, and again, the knife sinking into his chest with a wet squelch, blood soaking the sheets in a pool that spread like an inverted halo, until his body went still, his glassy eyes fixed on the ceiling. I screamed then, a primal cry of release and trauma, cutting the ropes from my feet with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and staggered out into the rain that washed my naked skin, running through the forest in blind panic, branches lashing my bruised flesh, roots biting into my bare feet until they bled. I collapsed on the main road, a truck driver stopping with blinding headlights, and in the ambulance, as the red lights danced in my vision, I sobbed for the women in the album, for myself, for the monster I had killed but still breathed in my veins. The police arrived later. Photos of the cabin, Victor's body stiff in his own blood, the album as evidence of his chain of horrors. And I repeated the story in fragments, my voice a hollow echo in the police station that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy. The detective taking notes with a chewed pencil as I described every cut, every blow, every word that had broken me. They found remains in the woods, bones from one of the women, identified by DNA as a missing person from 3 years ago. And Victor turned out to be a serial predator, his apartment in the city a nest of trophies, stolen jewelry, diaries detailing hunts. I was a hero in the headlines. Woman kills her captor in self-defense. But the horror didn't go away with his death. It settled in me like an eternal tenant. The nights are a minefield of nightmares. I feel his weight on me, his knife on my skin, the ghost semen drying inside me, and I wake up screaming, the sheets tangled like ropes, my heart a fist in my chest. Therapy helps, words about trauma and resilience. But in the stillness, I look at my reflection. The white scars on my thigh, my chest, a map of survival. And I see his shadow in my eyes, the fear that turned me into a murderer. I saved my life, but I lost the innocence of that date, the wine that tasted like betrayal, and in every man I look at now, I search for the crack, the sleeping Victor waiting to wake up. The night never ends. It only changes form, and in its embrace, I find courage forged in blood, but also a void that no story can fill. I always knew that the world was rotten to the core. I learned this at the age of 8, watching my father stub out cigarettes on my mother's arm. He wasn't some monster from a fairy tale. He was a tired man who smelled of beer and defeat, and his evil was commonplace, domestic. Perhaps that's why, when I met Elisa, I thought I recognized in her still eyes the same skepticism, the same scar on her soul. It was a catastrophic mistake. I mistook emptiness for depth. I met her in a used bookstore, a dusty place that smelled of dead paper. She was leafing through a 19th century anatomy book with illustrations of exposed muscles and nerves. Her long, pale fingers caressed the plates of dissected veins with a tenderness that struck me as gothic and fascinating. "It's more honest," she said without looking at me, as if continuing a conversation she was already having. "On the outside, we all lie. The skin is the best facade." I turned, spellbound. Her hair was black and straight as a cut in reality, and her eyes were so light gray that they seemed transparent. She smiled at me, and it was a smile that didn't light up anything. It just took up space on her face. That's how it all started, with dates in quiet cafes where she spoke little but observed a lot. She asked me uncomfortable, intimate questions. "How did you feel when your father died?" "Relief." "Have you ever wanted to hurt someone just to see their face contort?" Stupid me thought it was depth, a philosophical mind exploring the abyss. I answered her honestly, laying bare my own wounds, thinking it was a kind of intimacy. It was like feeding a hungry creature I couldn't see. The first red flag was the bird, a goldfinch that crashed into her apartment window. I wanted to pick it up and take it to a vet, but she knelt down first. She took it in her long-fingered hands. The little animal was twitching, terrified, its tiny heart beating like a speck of panic. "How fragile," Elisa murmured, and then, with terrifying calm, she squeezed. It wasn't a sudden gesture, but a firm and steady pressure. There was a slight dry crack. The bird lay still. She looked at me, and in her eyes there was no triumph, no guilt, nothing. Just the serene curiosity of a scientist after a completed experiment. "It's not suffering anymore," she said, and left the little body in my hand. I was paralyzed, the blood freezing in my veins. I justified it, you know. I told myself it had been an act of mercy, that the animal was going to die anyway. My mind, already hooked on the promise of her strangeness, refused to see the truth. I had enjoyed the power to extinguish something. On the night of the date, the big date, I made my second mistake, agreeing to go to her house. She lived in the suburbs, in an isolated house she had inherited from an eccentric aunt. "It's more intimate," she told me on the phone, her voice a thread of poisoned silk. "We can cook together, no distractions." The car ride was silent. She stared out the window, moistening her lips from time to time. I, idiot that I was, drove with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The fear that was already present confused me with the vertigo of desire. The house was a cube of concrete and glass, modern and cold, planted in the middle of a dark pine forest. There were no other lights for miles around. Upon entering, the smell of cleanliness was excessive, chemical, like a hospital. There were no photos, no decorations, only straight lines, minimalist furniture, and shelves with books on forensic medicine and abnormal psychology. "Welcome to my sanctuary," she said, closing the door behind me. The click of the lock sounded like a gun misfiring. We had dinner. She had made pasta. She ate with exaggerated delicacy, cutting each strand of spaghetti with her fork, as if performing surgery. The conversation drifted, as always, into murky territory. "Do you think pain defines us, Marcos?" she asked, tilting her head. "I suppose so. It marks us." "Or reveals us," she corrected. "It tears away the surface and shows what's underneath. The real flesh." I felt a chill. I tried to divert the conversation to talk about a movie, anything normal, but she always came back. It was a pit I couldn't escape. After dinner, she offered me some wine. It was red, thick, with a metallic aftertaste that I attributed to a bad harvest. I drank. She didn't touch hers. She just watched me, a slight smile playing on her lips. I began to feel strange, a heaviness in my limbs, a gray fog descending on my thoughts. The world lost definition. The straight lines of the house became wavy. "Elisa," I muttered, trying to get up. My legs wouldn't respond. It was as if they were made of lead. "Shh," she said, coming closer. Her face swam in front of me. "Don't resist. It's time for true intimacy." She grabbed my arm. Her touch was no longer cold. It was feverish. With a strength I didn't think she was capable of, she dragged me off the couch. I fell to my knees on the cold tile floor. I wanted to scream, but only a hoarse groan came out of my throat. Pure crystalline panic electrocuted every neuron in my brain. She dragged me down the hallway to a door I hadn't seen before. It wasn't made of wood, but metal, like an industrial refrigerator. She opened it. The interior was white, illuminated by blinding LED lights. It smelled of disinfectant and something else. A sweet, nauseating smell I couldn't identify. It was an operating room, or a perverse simulation of one. There was a stainless steel stretcher, trays with instruments, scissors, scalpels, forceps, and, most horrifying, leather straps with metal buckles. "No, please," I stammered, my fingers clinging to the doorframe. Her response was a sharp blow to my side, precise and professional. The pain, sharp and unexpected, made me let go. I fell face down in the white room. She closed the door. The sound of the latch falling was my condemnation. What followed was a systematic descent into a godless hell, with only a priestess in a white coat and icy eyes. With terrifying efficiency, she lifted me onto the stretcher and strapped my wrists and ankles down. The leather creaked as it tightened. I struggled, but the drugs and terror had turned me into a rag doll. She put on latex gloves. The sound of the latex stretching over her fingers was the most obscene I had ever heard in my life. "Let's play a game, Marcos," she said, her voice now a clinical whisper. "It's called Truth or Meat. I ask the questions. If you lie..." She picked up a scalpel from a tray, and the light reflected off its blade. "The truth comes out," she began. "Questions about my past, my fears, my most shameful secrets." At first, I tried to resist, to remain silent. The first time, the scalpel landed on my forearm and traced a thin red line. The pain was like a needle of fire. I screamed. She just nodded, satisfied. "The skin is the best disguise," she repeated, wiping the blood away with gauze. "But you can't lie from the inside." And so it continued. Question, answer. If I hesitated, if she saw in my eyes that I was hiding something, the scalpel danced. They weren't deep cuts. She wasn't trying to kill me. They were precise incisions, calculated to inflict maximum pain with minimum structural damage. She was an artist, and I was her bleeding canvas. She talked as she worked, commenting on the quality of my dermis, the arrangement of my capillaries, the texture of my subcutaneous fat. "You're very interesting inside, Marcos. So vulnerable." The horror wasn't just the physical pain, which was overwhelming. It was the psychological violation. She knew all my weaknesses, all the wounds I had confessed to her in cafes, and she used them as leverage. "Did your mother cry like this when your father beat her?" she asked as she salted a wound with alcohol. "Do you feel as helpless now as you did then?" It was total abuse of my body, my mind, my history. She was dismantling me, layer by layer, not to steal anything from me, but to prove she could do it, to see what was inside, to confirm her theory that we are all just flesh and fear. In a moment of lucidity amid the fog of pain and drugs, my gaze met the reflection of light on one of the metal trays. I saw my face, gaunt, pale, streaked with sweat and tears, and I saw his, focused, serene, with a spark of genuine scientific interest in his gray eyes. There was no hatred. There was no passion, only an infinite and perverse curiosity. That was the most terrifying thing of all. The night faded into an endless succession of questions, cuts, and muffled screams. I lost track of time. I urinated myself. I vomited. I was no longer a man. I was a wounded animal, trapped in a cage of white pain. The end came with dawn. She suddenly seemed to lose interest, as if she had gathered all the data she needed. She dropped the scalpel onto the tray with a metallic click. She took off her red-stained gloves and threw them into a hazardous waste bag. "You've been an excellent subject," she said, her voice tired but satisfied. "Very cooperative." She approached me. I cringed, waiting for the coup de grace, but she just ran a finger over one of the fresh wounds on my chest, collecting a little blood. She brought it to her mouth. "Salty," she murmured, "like tears." Then she injected something into the IV in my arm. A muscle relaxant and an amnesic. It won't work completely, I know, but it will help you process. Darkness enveloped me before I could protest. I woke up on the side of a country road 10 kilometers from the city. The morning sun hurt my eyes. My body was a map of pain. Under my clothes, the bandages she had put on me were already soaked with blood. In my jacket pocket, I found a bottle of painkillers and a note written in her neat, orderly handwriting. "The charade is over. Now you know what lies beneath. Beneath you and beneath me. Take care, Marcos. Your inner geometry is memorable." I didn't go to the police. What was I going to tell them? That my date was a soul surgeon who had dissected me alive. They would laugh at me. Or worse, they would lock me up. Now I live somewhere else. I changed my name. But every night, when I undress, I see the scars. Thin. White. Like verses from a horrific poem written on my skin. They are a reminder that evil is not a monster under the bed. It is the person who offers you a glass of wine with a metallic aftertaste. It is the quiet smile that you mistake for depth. And sometimes, in the crowd, I think I see her face. Her hair, black as a cut. Her gray, transparent eyes that look at me and seem to say, "Skin is the best disguise, but I've already read your script of ashes." And the worst part is that she's right.